Clock says 9. Not naughty.
Check mine too. I don't put it all in. Turn it on. Leave computer on.
You might want to just leave on the.
We definitely don't want to hear ourselves. twice.
Okay. Even when you have it turned off, it says, that. Okay. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. I don't get to hear the bells in the courthouse for an unforeseeable amount of time because they're not working. They're being fixed. So I'm going to call this meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners to order. I'm a little bit under the weather today and have a cough. So if I break out in coughs, I will turn it over to Greg to continue the conversation. But as we do every Monday morning, we're going to start with public comment this morning. And I just want to highlight that we will not have public comment as part of our workshop this afternoon regarding the consolidated homeless grant, because that is our only time that the three of us can talk to each other, and we haven't had a chance to really. So if you have comments regarding that item, please make them this morning here at 9 o'clock. And if you're online and wish to make a public comment, you can use the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 and your hand will go up. And I will start with folks in the room. Who in the room would like to make public comments? Probably. Viola, great, huh? Okay, I think I'm gonna limit public comment to 2 minutes today because we have so many people interested in making comment. So let's start with you, Holly, and then we'll just go around the room and then we'll come back to the folks online.
Right. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Holly Morgan. I'm the Executive Director of BOCC, and I am here today to offer some points to ponder regarding the potential move of the Consolidated Homeless Grant from BOCC to Jefferson County. I urge you to proceed with intention and caution on this matter. Should the county assume leadership over CHG, this will further weaken BOCC at a critical time when we are getting back on our feet after a few very difficult years. This decision will make BOCC's future uncertain, but that is not the only potential consequence. Our community cannot afford to have a hiccup in this vital service provision. A change of this magnitude should only occur when a great deal of thought and planning has gone into how the change will be implemented. I want to voice my concern that Jefferson County is considering making a change that will have a massive impact on housing support countywide. And I suggest that you could not strategically weigh the impact of this and intentionally plan for how you might execute this change in a period of less than 1 month. With respect, it is not responsible action to make this transition without deep strategic reflection and community input in the planning. I understand that the county has suggested they take lead and contract back to BOCC. Please hear me. As of October 31st, BOCC has supplemented CHG with over $30,000 in unrestricted funding. This contract requires gap funding because it does not cover the costs of running the program. Without the 10% administrative allowance that is allowed by the contract to cover required costs like HR and payroll, BOCC services at current levels will not be possible. I cannot make any commitment today that BOCC will be able to continue to provide housing services. And while we have several high quality and deeply committed partners in the housing services community, none are currently prepared to take this on. Have you approached any of these providers? Do you have any solid idea of what the county will do if they opt to run this program?
That's 2 minutes.
Okay. I'll just leave this for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone, who else in the room would like to make a comment? Viola, do you want to come up?
I actually am not going to be speaking
Okay.
here, but I do have statements from staff that I will be submitting for the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who else in the room would like to come on up?
My name's Becky Forrester, and I actually live at Caswell Brown Village. That place, you know, without that place, there would be a lot of us in a lot. It'd still be doing a lot of bad things we weren't doing before, you know. That place gave me a place that was stable enough for me to have my dogs and my belongings safe and be able to go out and do normal things that, you know, I've gotten quite a bit accomplished. I've gotten all my legal troubles out of my way. I have been able to apply for jobs that I hadn't done before. Working on my education, like without Caswell Brown, that is impossible. And there's a lot of people there that need, and I want more people to have the opportunity I got. Because it really did make all the difference for me. That's about what I got.
Thank you. Who else in the room? Aggie? And then the gentleman over here, you'll be next.
Rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. OLCAP, when it started in 1968, it was a bunch of tents on the Washington Monument lawn. 55 years later, I don't think they know what they are. Today I would like to talk about the Department of Ecology. In 1968, Ethel Cole and Robert Walker were crushed to death in a garbage truck. And when they went on strike, they wore signs that said, "I am a man," and they had National Guard rifles pointed at them. Martin Luther King came down. He was assassinated the next day. This year's theme is the noble commitment to the struggle of equal rights. The Marine Center has said it's okay for disabled people and homeless people and disenfranchised people to come down to the beaches in the name of Martin Luther King and clean up the garbage from privileged white people on the beach. But the Port Townsend Yacht Club is for sale. We would like to have it as, apparently the Port of Port Townsend and the Port Townsend Yacht Club think that homeless people would be a detriment to the shoreline ecology. So it's okay for disabled people who have cancer, autism, epilepsy, who are LGBTQ natives, who are outside in wheelchairs, and they can clean up privileged garbage, but they are garbage if they want a homeless day center.
That's 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
I see more hands going up in the Zoom room. We'll come to you next, but we will respond to all the comments received at the end of comments. So this gentleman over here was next.
I am concerned about a different topic. My name is Gary Doherty. I reside in Fort Ludlow, and the timber agreement we understand is coming up for renewal. This was discussed in a Fort Ludlow Village Council meeting. Greg Brotherton represented the council there. And we understand that there'll be a DCD recommendation, possibly not to renew. And that there'll be a subsequent board vote. I'd like to know what the timeline is for that, because there are a number of residents who are concerned. And we have questions about what would happen if it lapsed. We also would like just an opportunity to discuss our concerns with the board. And we'd like some advice on how to proceed. So
Thank you, Harry.
okay, thank you.
Who else in the room? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Jamie Fowler. I'm a case manager at OLCAP. This is about the CHG grant. When I came to Port Townsend in 2019, I was living in my van. I was pregnant and I had my 6-year-old son with me. I had an amazing job in Spokane as a substance use counselor and a nice home, but the baby's father was not so nice. Terrified, I came to Port Townsend for safety and a fresh start. I had family here, but the only space they had was a musty old shed with a Murphy bed. My stepmother told me about OLCAP. I went there and was helped by the nicest people. They had no quick fixes, but they did paperwork with me and gave me a direction. I was able to get a job at DSHS with help from OECAP's employment program, and eventually OECAP was able to put me in their family emergency shelter, also known as the Hand Street Cabins. It was a year and a half later, there was finally an availability. It was March 1st, 2020. Then the whole world shut down. I was so grateful to be housed where I was not responsible to pay rent. And DSHS also shut down, so I lost my job. Throughout the quarantine, I was called and visited by both my housing and my employment case managers at OECAP. It meant everything to have that support and not feel alone. After the world reopened, my employment case manager was sending my resumes to places for me and getting me interviewed to use my counseling license again. But then one day she called me and asked me if I would like to work at OECAP. Because I had been referred by several people, including all my case managers. Without hesitation, I said yes. I could have made a lot more money working as a counselor with my credentials. However, the amount of support OECAP showed me through one of the scariest times of my life was priceless. And I was so grateful, and I just wanted to give this back to others. Just a few of the examples of people I've been able to help since working there.
That's 2 minutes.
Thank you. so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Who else in the room? Anyone else in the room?
I just want to take 30 seconds.
Okay, come on up, Viola.
I apologize. I just want to make sure that this information is heard. The CHG fund, because of funding like EHF, Emergency Housing Fund, has supplemented a lot of unfunded operations activities at Caswell Brown Village, and it likely would if we had it again. But also, the new shelter would not be possible without CHG funds. That's all I have.
And then I saw your hand back there. Come on up.
Okay, seems to me that there's a lot of funding for the homeless people, for the homeless situation, but everybody's squabbling about who's gonna run what program, who's getting the money. Meanwhile, the homeless people are still suffering and nothing's getting done. It's time that you guys just come together and say, okay, let's fix the problem. Nobody wants to fix the problem. Everybody wants to hold on to the money for themselves and not do anything. People like Viola, who wants to do something, you don't want to give the money to. Nobody wants to do anything except argue about what to do. There's simple solutions, but nobody wants to do it. Meanwhile, we all suffer, and nobody seems to care. They're all worried about who's going to run what program instead of running the program. Meanwhile, like I said, we suffer. And I don't see what the problem is, except you guys arguing about who's going to do what, who's getting what. Meanwhile, nothing's getting done.
Appreciate that comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? In the back there?
I'm Chris Hannon. I work at OECAP as the Youth Services Manager. I had previously worked under OECAP's Head Start program as a preschool teacher. I was looking for a career change, and I still really wanted to help people, and I saw the good work that the organization had been doing in that space, so I wanted to stay with the organization. I had heard about all the new leadership that was taking over in the housing department, and so I went there and interviewed. I accepted the job offer there after being impressed by the new leadership and what they discussed during the interview. In particular, our new housing director, Viola's commitment to bettering the services that were provided and the vision that she has for the department. Since then, I've seen dramatic improvements in both youth services where I currently work, as well as adult site housing. And in particular, one of the most vital services that OECAP provides, not only in emergency assistance to people experiencing homelessness and all the various struggles that might surround, is the opportunities that we provide for them to make long-term improvements by joining our workforce, even if they don't have professional experience. so that we can sort of end the cycles that people are finding themselves stuck in, rather than just providing the temporary support that might come from other groups and things like that.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your comment. Anyone else in the room? Maggie, you already made a comment. Anyone else in the room? Physically, there's a number of hands online, so I'll go to online and I'll come back to the room just in case someone feels moved to make a comment who hasn't already. So starting online, I see there are a number of callers online. If you're a caller online who wishes to make a public comment this morning, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and then we'll bring you over, and *6 to unmute. So let's see. Let's start with Vicky. I'm asking her to unmute. Vicky.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Can you
Vicky,
hear
we
me?
can hear.
Thumbs up?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking today on the matter of awarding the Consolidated Homeless Grant as a community member. As anyone who has invested a lot of time in a cause, I care about the outcomes. I want to see the development of an equitable, accountable, and transparent homeless crisis response system. First and foremost, for the sake of everyone experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity in Jefferson County. My sense is that the decisions you make today could have a major impact on what we as a community are able to achieve in service of seeing everyone in our county has a fair shot at housing security. In that regard, the question before you today is not only who has the capacity to do the essential work of developing and managing the homeless response system, but also who has the responsibility to develop the necessary capabilities. By the way, an equitable, accountable, and transparent homeless crisis response system is a key objective laid out by the Department of Commerce for our next 5-year plan to end homelessness. My belief is that development, management, and oversight of the system is a shared responsibility between the city, county, service providers, and commerce. We cannot just outsource system management to OLECAP. It clearly isn't working, and not just because OLECAP's new management hasn't had time to prove itself. Where we have seen progress is when we have collaboration across service providers for building a homeless response system. From my albeit own limited perspective, the Consolidated Homeless Grant structure is not designed for one service agency in a multi-stakeholder system to have all the responsibility and the decision-making power over.
What? Okay. Next we're gonna go to Ed. So maybe it's Ed Bowen with call signs behind his name.
You
Okay.
got it, boss. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ed Bowen, West Jefferson citizen.
Ed, you have
Quick
2 minutes.
question. Quick question is the agenda item today with Olympic National Park, is that going to allow for public, I'd say, engagement if we have a question or whatever? If not, that kind of charts up what I have to address today. If you can.
I would say make your comment now.
Well, then I'm going to comment on South Shore Road, which is not captured in your agenda item. South Shore Road Emergency Management Resolution passed last week. What is the plan of the counties? So that's my question for you today. What is the funding source to fix this? What is the temporary solution to bypass this? And given the fact that the North Shore Road is closed as an alternative, that depends on the South Shore Road being open to be able to access the park. But what's even more important, how about access to all that private property that's above the washout of 1.3 point? How are those private property owners going to access their property now? So I advocate you reach out to emergency management. Willie, who has not responded to anything I've sent to him, in getting what are the options for these private property owners during this emergency. And back to the how to pay for all this, I hope the county, as you go forward, I understand you're talking to Senator Murray, you talk about the continuing resolution, House Bill 10545. On page 58 is the National Park Service Capital Fund for $2.3 billion for these very, very, very qualifiable issues. You ought to put that on the agenda, not what the news media claims is the Hurricane Ridge bailout. I think you need to think about all these roads that are closed in the park and the Forest Service, such as Dosey Wallops, which you addressed last year with the Forest Service Park, but we don't have the Dosey Wallops solution. We have the Elwha closed on Olympic Hot Springs Road. We have the Soul Duck road closed for mostly for the season, but it does have some road issues. And throughout the Forest Service, you have all these closures that give access to the national park, such as the High Divide Bridge keeps having problems. So we'll leave it there. Thank you. Get back to me. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll bring Tom Tiersch. You'll have 2 minutes for public comment.
Good morning, commissioners. Couple of things, none of them quite as important as some of the subjects that have been discussed already, but glad to see the flag code item on your consent agenda. I can't remember the number of times that I've had to point out how the flag in your chambers was misplaced. So good to have a reminder. It's correct today. One thing, though, that seems to be missing from the resolution is a statement to the effect that all county offices should display the flag. It says, yeah, we're going to follow the U.S. and Washington laws. Well, of course, that should go without saying. But without specifically pointing out the display being required in all county buildings, I'm not sure I see much point in having the resolution at all. But at least it's there. It does no harm. The other thing is, I'm not sure I'll have time later today to chime in, but I wanted to mention on the proposed insert for the JAC survey. Just notice that a lot of us get billed electronically and pay our bill electronically, so we won't receive any kind of paper copy of a survey. And I'll tell you, electronically, it goes unnoticed if something is added to the bill electronically. Most people will not look at any kind of insert. It just isn't obvious that there's something else to be downloaded or looked at on the site. So I'm not sure how effective or how representative that kind of a survey is going to be. You should probably ask the PUD how many customers receive electronic billing. I think it's a pretty large percentage these days because it's so much more efficient. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Shelley, you'll have 2 minutes for public comment.
Good morning, Shelley Yarnell. I want to echo Tom's PUD statement. Also, we in Brennan don't get, I'm not sure whether you're sending them out in all PUD statements, but we in Brennan don't get PUD water statements from Jefferson County. So you're limiting there as well. As far as the JAC survey, I'd like to know what the questions are. We all know that a survey is only as good as the questions presented and can be slanted either direction. So before that goes out, it would be a good thing to let a more varied group know what those questions are so that they can have some input. On the homeless grant, I'm in favor of Jefferson County taking it away from OLICAP. I think it's time for OLICAP to just quit having things phoned in. You have a few people who are talking in the audience today about how much OLICAP has done for them, and I'm sure that there are more, but there are also multiple dozens at the very least of people who have absolutely negative experiences with OLICAP and don't appreciate the treatment and the services that they get from them. I think that the homeless problem is a big one, and I think that it can't just be left with Ole Cap because they've been shown that they cannot handle it, even to the point where utility funds for winter heating, you can't get an appointment for months because they don't have the staff to handle it. We've had new management. New management is great, but we don't know that it's going to be a positive thing until it isn't. So I'm supportive of looking for a new solution to this problem. Thank you.
Kelly, that's 2 minutes. Okay, Julia, you'll have 2 minutes for public comment. And if there's anyone else on the attendee list who wish to make a comment, you can use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If anyone's on the phone with us, you can press *9 to raise your hand and we'll bring you over. Okay, Julia.
Hi, my comment's really brief. Good morning. Is that I was trying to get you on my phone because I have a busy day and I want to listen to that conversation, and your website has gotten impossible. I kept ending up in laserfish hell. So I'm on my computer talking to you, but it's just a comment that whatever's going on with your website is driving me absolutely nuts because it's not easy to find current agenda. That's it. Have a good week.
Thank you, Julia. Okay. Anyone else in the room who wants to make a public comment? Yeah, come on up. And then you'll have 2 minutes for comment.
My name is Karen Bondurant, and I'm the property manager currently with Ole Cap. And I would just like to respond to some of the comments that were made. Yes, there have been some negative experiences, I'm sure, by people in the community. We understand that. We do the best that we can. But I wanted to take this opportunity just to highlight a few of the stories that they don't hear about. And one of them is we took a woman, a mother with 5 children, living in her car, and stabilized her at the Haines Street Cabins. And this is through the assistance with CHG and all the other services that we provide. We're able to get her stabilized. She then transitioned into Seventh Haven, 3-bedroom unit there, where once stabilized, and she was able to take care of herself and her children, and was able to do the work necessary to get on the list for a Habitat for Humanity house, and now is in a Habitat Humanity house and has ended potentially generational poverty. So we not only got her housed, but she is now into home ownership. That's one of many that the community doesn't hear. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to share that with you and to remember that for maybe one of the negatives. There are also positives in all of the work that we do, and the CHG is part of that. So we would like to continue our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And I'll just reiterate that we'll respond to all comments after all the public comments are done. And looks like we have one more. Jean, you'll have 2 minutes for public comment. Maybe getting the last word today. I don't know. Jean, you'll need to unmute. Oh, she went away. She go back to the. Oh, there she is. There you are. Hi, Jean. You're blipping in and out.
Faster than you.
She just unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Now we can hear you.
Somebody wave or nod or something. I can't hear you.
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Jean.
I think Heidi's giving me the thumbs up. I can't hear you, but I'm going to speak anyway. So I agree that we've got problems with the calendar issue on the website. I assume that this is a work in progress and it needs a little bit of progress. That would be very helpful. None of the links work and it hasn't been populated with the meetings. So that would be nice to see some improvement on. I agree with the comments Mr. Bowen made about the parks. I agree that all of these many decommissioned or damaged roads in the park could use some attention. And I've been quite touched by the fact that many people are offering what is essentially a bake sale to help fund the repairs. We're having people offer for a GoFundMe account and offering of their artistic creations in order to raise money to help us repair these roads. my teaching out. I'm hoping that we better solution that comes with money faster. I agree with Miss Yarnell and Mr. Tiersch about the Jack survey, and I do not have public water. I do not receive a bill like that, so I don't know if this is a well thought out or planned or comprehensive approach. So I'm hoping that that could be given a little more thought, and those questions really need to be vetted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay. I think we are done with public comments. Not seeing more hands up. Huh? We're done. We're done. Okay, so we are done with public comment. Who would like to respond first?
Wow, me?
Go for it, right?
Let's see, I'm gonna go back to the beginning here. So I think I might just kind of consolidate some of the OLICAP, my response to a lot of to everyone who's seeking, especially in favor of keeping, keeping the funding coordination with OLICAP. So I think that's the first thing that we're gonna workshop this afternoon, and I wanna really talk about what is it that we're talking about. So first I wanna say thank you to those of you who specifically brought information in your public comment today about what would be lost. That was exactly the question that I was asking at the Housing Fund Board meeting. And I heard a few bits of information about that today, which is exactly what I was looking for. I want to try to understand because a lot of us have been saying today that what we're talking about is removing the consolidated homeless grant dollars from OLICAP. But actually what we're discussing is the continuum of care, or the COC. So that's the oversight that then distributes those CHG dollars. So that doesn't mean that OLICAP wouldn't get CHG dollars. What it does mean, and what I want to better understand, is those administrative dollars that also come with the grant. Some of those dollars might not go to OLICAP, although they do go with each grantee. So I think we just need to really parse out what dollars are we talking about here. So when I think of removing, and just saying, okay, we're going to move the overall oversight to Jefferson County, that doesn't necessarily mean that OLICAP would not receive dollars. However, Viola, you gave some really important information that there are some unfunded operations at Caswell Brown Village, and you mentioned one other thing that they didn't capture. So I'll try to get more information about that actually are funded by the CHG admin dollars. So that's exactly the detail that I'd like to know. What are we talking about if those dollars don't go to OLICAP? So I hope that we can talk more about that in the workshop and really understand that, because I totally agree, Holly, that we need to really think this through. We need to think about capacity, and we need to think about impact. So I'm hoping that we can get as much information as we can on the table. I don't think anyone's intent here is to reduce service at OLICAP or anywhere else. So and I think that I'll just say thank you, especially to those who told their stories today. Thank you so much for that. It really does make a difference. And the last thing I'll say just about the overall, all of the OLICAP comments, is that I think many of you know that I just came from, working for many years at Bayside Housing and Services. So I get it. It's not always perfect, the work that is done there. And I will also just add on that I saw the difference. I saw when before Holly Morgan and Viola Ware, and I've seen since they're stepping into these roles. And there is a big difference. And I do have a lot of confidence in your work and in the work of your team. So we'll do what we can to support that. I think there's also some great possibilities in having oversight outside of the providers themselves. So I really want to look at that and understand what it would the benefit, because Vicky's comment was also really appropriate, that our goal is to provide the best service that we can across the entire county to serve as many people as possible. And that means multiple organizations jumping in to roll up their sleeves. So we need to understand how to do this, and we'll do as much digging in as we can
to make sure we do that right. Maggie, I just want to tell you, I think that a lot of your comments, starting with President Carter through your protester examples, what I hear from what you're saying is to really lift up the people who have marginalized voices, and that we don't always do that well. And so I just want to say that I heard that, and that I like continue to partner with you to make sure you do an excellent job of representing those voices. And I appreciate every time you come and talk with us. So thank you for sharing those comments. Mr. Doherty, thank you.
Yeah,
Doherty.
It's hard for everyone.
It is, thank you. And also a few others, I think Ed and Jean, sorry, actually, your comments were about the Port Ludlow timber agreement. I think you may know I'm a brand new commissioner on my second meeting, and so I'm just learning about this issue, but you gave me a couple of things to talk about or to learn about, and I heard your questions about what would happen if the agreement lapses, that you want an opportunity to speak to the board, and that we should provide advice on how to proceed. And I think those are all really valid, reasonable requests that can easily be fulfilled.
That's all great.
Yeah, so thanks for showing up to talk about those things. Please, if I'm not addressing your direct comment, specifically those who talked about Holy Cap, I hope that Bill heard in that general. I just want to kind of make sure we go ahead. Squabbling, holding on to the money for ourselves versus seeking simple solutions and really getting the work done. I really heard that comment. That is something that we're always trying to balance, and we want to make sure that that is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. I think that's what we are trying to accomplish, is to get the work done and work together. So thank you for reminding us of that. Ed and Jean addressed some road issues. Again, I'm really getting up to speed on this. I have a lot of confidence in the public works departments, but you've both provided some really interesting alternatives, some things that we can explore. And I really appreciate the ideas, because it's going to take a whole lot of creativity to solve these roads challenges, which are deeply complex and challenging. Mr. Tiersch, and I think Shelley and Jean, you all talked about the JAC survey, and which is the Jefferson Aquatic Coalition survey that's going to go out. And the idea was that our PUD would use their paper mailing to distribute part of that survey. I think that's been confusing to people. Deb Peterson, a resident in District 1, asked about that as well by email. So I was able to reach out, and Greg has this information as well. That survey will absolutely be made available electronically as well. It is available online right now, but they just don't want people to use it prematurely because it hasn't been vetted yet. So it will be passed around, and people will have access to it electronically, whether you receive a paper bill or not. So I hope that alleviates the concern. We are going to talk a little bit more about that later in the agenda. So stick around for that if you're interested. The idea of vetting the questions, I think we are going to talk about that somewhat today. And I think it's really, really appropriate, because I completely agree that surveys can be slanted, and how we ask the questions is really important. There were also some website concerns. So I just want, because I am brand new, the staff pointed out something pretty important, which was going to the website. Just, you know, totally agree that things need to be continually improved. I'm not saying that it doesn't. But if you are on the website, in the upper right-hand corner, if you click on the services button at the very top, and then go to Laserfish web portal from there, I have found that vastly easier. Then you click on Board of Commissioners from there, and then the BOCC agenda packets. find that to be much more direct and simple than using the calendar below. So that's just a tip, because I've been learning it myself. And we will continue to look at that. I think I've addressed everything, and I want to move it on to the other commissioners. So thank you for all your comments.
Thanks, Heather. I'll go. I know we've got Public Works here and National Parks to talk, as well as a proclamation to get to. So I agree with, just about everything that Commissioner Dudley Nolet said. I'll add a few things. Regarding OLECAP and the Consolidated Homeless Grant, I agree. I think the two statements I'll highlight were both Holly's talking about what are the impacts of that 10% admin, and that's really kind of what we're talking about in continuum of care, as Heather's talking about. And I also agree with Vicky that we're talking about a system that really does need to get improved. And I also have recognized a lot of improvement in the system. We'll save the deliberation for that workshop coming up. It's a big conversation that's come very fast, and I appreciate everyone's insight into it. And we want to make the system work, and that's really what we're here to work on. Regarding Gary and timber agreement, just really quickly, the cut in the Port Ludlow NPR happened before any of these commissioners were here. There was a timber agreement that reconciled that. People in Port Ludlow are very concerned that NPR agreement sunsets at the end of June 2025. The Port Ludlow Associates has asked to kick that another 5 years. I'm trying to bring DCD with me to the next village council meeting to talk and to also do a town hall with the Port Ludlow community to make sure that those opinions are heard. It's an agreement just really between the two parties, and it is the timber agreement is associated with that NPR agreement, the development agreement. So it does sunset. That doesn't mean that it's just free for all, but it does mean that those open space zoning areas are in a different place than they are now. But we will definitely, I hear you. I'm glad that you were able to join us today, and more on that soon. Ed, we'll talk about this in just a moment. So I'll just say that I've seen the permit that residents can use to get access beyond that closure to access their properties. And we're talking about different funding opportunities in just a moment. So I'll hold that. Regarding the PUD bill survey, we're going to go over the survey questions in that workshop today, so I won't belabor that either. But Heather's exactly right. This is one of many ways that we're trying to get this survey out to the public. We want everyone to fill out the survey. So we'll amplify it. This is another way to amplify it. It's also a way to consolidate a design that we can use for different opportunities. We'll have a rack card that we can put in many different locations, and it'll have both a tourist and a resident aspect to it. And to Julia and Jean, user experience is something that's important to me, and I think it is. I take your point, and it's something that we need to address to make sure that our meetings are as accessible as possible. And so it's something I'm really focused on. Our frustration with AV capture right now is a big part of that, and we really need to work on our systems a little bit. So that is on us. I appreciate the note, Julia, and appreciate Tom's note on the flag policy as always about the all county offices displaying it, and we can speak to that as we talk about the agenda item. So we'll talk about all these things more. I'd love to keep going on. I brought my banjo and a poem to share, but we might not have time for that right now. So.
Sorry, Greg, I like poems better than anyone.
Yes.
And I have a cough, and I'm not gonna try to respond. I really appreciate the thorough comments from Heather and Greg's additions, and am sensitive to our guests who are waiting online to speak to us about the road issue, and to Robert being in the room to talk to us about the proclamation today. So I'm gonna prior to close public comment, I'm going to ask that we bring over folks who are here to talk about the Upper Hill Road and other National Park Road issues that have been mentioned today. I see that we have Monty and Eric, our Public Works team, in the room with us. If you're online and you're one of our guests for the National Park Roads issue, Sula, Kevin, Jeff, And you're on a phone. Could you raise your hand so we know that that's one of you? I don't see all of your names listed in the attendee list.
Yeah.
Okay,
Jeff.
there we go. We got them. Okay, they're coming up. I'm thinking that's somebody Jacob, but I'm not sure. Good morning, Rod.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Thanks for being with us, Rob.
We're just trying to get Sula.
Sula's on the phone, 2*9.
Sula, if you're on the phone, could you press *9 to raise your hand?
Unfortunately, Sula won't be able to join us today. She's had some family concerns that she needs to be addressing, but I am here as well as Jeff Dorieland.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna turn it over to you guys to start out with. I mean, we also have our Public Works Director, Monty Reinders, and Assistant Public Works Director, Eric Kuzma, in the room with us. I don't know if you want to come up to the table with Mark, so. Monty, sorry.
So much lately.
Yeah. So let's start out with the Park Service guys. And we know that there's, or do we need maybe an update on the road conditions? How are things shaping up?
Road conditions haven't changed much in the last week or two, because, you know, the river flows have been down, so it remains similar to the photos you've seen, which is, you know, the road is closed at Upper Hill Road, milepost 9.8. Part of one lane is gone for, you know, nearly the length of a football field. And then the South Shore Quinault Road has a hole eaten into it at 1.3 miles above the county line there. So roads closed at both locations. Erosion's going to continue when there are, you know, additional high flow events out there. We got plenty of winter left for that, so it's likely we'll lose more road at those locations. Currently, we don't have any funding in hand to address those areas. We're working with the multiple permitting agencies to secure, you know, permits for emergency repairs should we get funding. You know, we've done this dozens of times through my career and Eric's career here, so we're not new to how to do this. Our contractors know what to do, but it's no matter of having the funding in hand to do it. All of the repairs over the years have been federally funded one way or the other on those roads. Usually Federal Highways ER program, which requires a larger state declaration of emergency. There are thresholds for that to happen that they're currently gathering storm data on to see if they can meet those thresholds. These roads, since they're FHWA eligible, are FEMA eligible, and there's wasn't enough damage to kick off a FEMA event anyway. But we're still waiting for payment on repairs we did in 2015 on the Oil City Road from FEMA to the tune of about $600,000, which is the pace that these things move at when you start doing work in rivers, because of all of the after the fact permitting discussions, which are hard to have when there's often, you know, not people in those positions to have them with, or both at the funding agency, the federal funding agency, and the permitting agencies. So in any case, like I said, we are working with Federal Highways and WashDOT to try to get the FHWA ER funding for these sites, which is the typical source of funding 90% of the time on these repairs. But that's a process that takes time. And there were not a lot of other damage events tied to the time that these roads washed out. There were damages to counties and WashDOT infrastructure in the bomb cyclone in November.
Right.
And perhaps there's a nexus between the two.
How do we explore that nexus?
WashDOT's working on that through their, with federal highways, collecting damage data from other counties and sites. So that's where we sit today. The county flat out does not have, at least the county road fund, so the money to go after these sites. We just do not, we wouldn't be doing a transportation benefit district this afternoon if we did. And we wouldn't have borrowed money to do the repair on Snow Creek Road 2 years ago, paying a loan off to do that repair. So that's where we're at financially.
And I know we have a meeting later in the week with you guys from National Parks to talk about this stuff, but are there additional questions or information that you guys wanted to provide this morning? Kevin, Jeff, Rod, anyone?
Sure. Thank you very much. Good morning, Commissioners of Jefferson County. Thanks for letting us join you today. My name is Kevin Killian. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Olympic National Park. Sula was hoping to be here this morning, but she's unable to, and she sends her regrets and regards. Also joining me here is Jeff Doryland, the Parks Chief of Facilities. As you're aware, the Upper Hoh Road has received major damage and is currently closed. Since the road's the only way into or out of the Hoh Rainforest portion of Olympic National Park, we've closed this incredibly popular area to visitors. And we've also restricted employee access to only that of a critical nature. And we're working with Eric and Monty to make sure that appropriate permitting is in place for employees to go into the closed road area. And as has been discussed, the Quinault South Shore Roads also received significant damage and is closed as well. We just want to take the opportunity to say how much we appreciate the communication and collaboration of Eric Kuzma with Jefferson County Public Works. He's been fantastic, and he's been in touch with us from the very beginning, and has worked with Jeff here in Olympic to set up a meeting at Park Headquarters, which you mentioned, to keep on working towards solutions. I just want to take this opportunity to let you know that absent a road repair, we anticipate continuing with full closure of the Hoh Rainforest area of the park for the foreseeable future. This area, as you know, contains the Hoh Rainforest Visitor Center, an 87-site campground, and multiple trailheads that allow an average of 300,000 members of the public annually to explore the spectacular rainforest, access the Hoh River, and begin their adventures into the park's wilderness. Thanks for allowing us to join you today, and I wanted to make myself or my staff available for any questions you might have. And again, as you mentioned, we have a follow-up meeting with Eric and others later on this week. So the conversation continues, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just also add that we did get Senator Murray's staff engaged on this issue last week, and they've been communicating with us regularly as well, trying to think through the funding issue from the federal side. So I've been working with Daniel Palethorpe, and so is Eric for the last week or so. Rod, did you have anything you wanted to add from the city's perspective?
Ma'am, yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Rod Fleck, I'm the City Attorney and Planner in Forks, which is not in Jefferson County. As you guys know, but in the West End, those lines get a little blurry. Really appreciate the opportunity just to speak briefly. And to Eric and to Monty, thank you for the updates. Thank you for the emails, especially over the holidays. A lot of work was coming out on this. That's always a heavy lift for both of you. It's, like me, it's not our first experience with this. It is reassuring to hear that Senator Murray's office is engaged, Commissioner Eisenhower. And also, that's kind of my first experience in the late 90s doing Christmas Eve conversations with Midori, then the transportation director for Senator Murray's office. And you may say, well, in Forks, why? It's a major tourism draw for the entire region. And obviously, it's so close to Forks that we are one of the beneficiaries of that. And it's a vital part of the infrastructure here. In the past, Jefferson County has had to shoulder a heavy load, and a lot of times that has had to be reimbursed down the pipeline. I have to say I'm saddened to hear that you still haven't been paid back for 2015 work. I think the community and citizenry need to understand that reimbursement process takes a long time. So we'll start explaining that out here, because I'm sure we're going to start hearing things about what does that mean for the road being closed. To the Park Service, we appreciate the hard work there as well. I had forwarded some things to Representative Randall's office that I'd had over my 30 years dealing with the road. Hoping to hear back. There's been an odd phone call that keeps coming into my phone from one number in DC, but no message. So I don't know. And when I return, it says someone will call you shortly. So I think the Forks community will probably be trying to see if we can provide letters of support, resolutions of support for your guys' efforts. That's what the community's done in the past. And Mayor Fletcher had indicated that, you know, if there's a way we can be supportive, definitely we hope to do so. But again, it is a huge draw, and it's a regional draw, and Jefferson County needs the assistance and help from the state and feds on this vital piece of infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't think any of it's lost on any of us of the treasure that road provides us access to. And as someone who's lived in Jefferson County for most of my life and been up in the Ho a bunch of times, I know how special it is. And I know that there are 300,000+ people a year who also want to check out the Ho. But I also know equally that the county doesn't have the funding. So we've shared that kind of fact with the federal agencies, and, you know, we're hoping that we can come up with a quick solution. And I've been talking with staff about how long does it take to fix a road? And actually, I was thinking it would take years. It doesn't take years. Doesn't take that long to fix a road. It just takes, we just need to have the funding to do it. So I'm really hopeful that we can all be echoing the same message. And, you know, the county is standing ready to help repair this road, but we need to find the funding to do it. So from us, I think that's it, unless anyone else has anything they want to add.
Got a little bit.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for being here, Kevin and Jeff, and also Rod for the solidarity. This is it's a regional problem, and it's, you know, these federal lands are, you know, we want to make sure that we maintain access to them. And I mean, I think the costs we're talking about are about $1 million all told between the South Shore Road and the Upper Ho Road. And I just, we had public comment earlier today about the continuing resolution. I guess, Kevin, my question for you guys is, do you think that that is a possible pot of money for funds? And then a second question is, you know, I know that we've got a mechanism in place that folks that do have down to the South Shore Road do have property beyond the closure at milepost 1.3, that they can get access to their properties, you know, with filling out a permit with Public Works. But I'm wondering about that bridge that's, I think you guys take out every winter, really. And is it an opportunity to put that bridge back in to restore access from the North Shore Road? Is that something that is in the cards at all?
I'll start off with a question about the disaster supplemental funding. So we don't have a lot of visibility of that just yet. So after the bill was signed into law, that goes to, I believe, the Office of Management and Budget, where they do their interpretation of things. And then at times, I believe there's some wheeling and dealing, if you will, about what those funds actually go towards. And it's not always as specified letter for letter or line for line in the law. So I don't know that, and we haven't gotten that information yet from our leadership in DC. So I will plead ignorance as to what's actually in there. We understand that there was money that was earmarked towards the replacement of the Hurricane Ridge Visitor Center, but beyond the specifics of that, I don't know. So I can't speak to whether those funds would possibly be available for this project. And for the question about the bridge, I'm going to defer that to Jeff Dorieland.
Good morning. Currently, our plan is to restore the bridge after the winter season. It's basically sitting on the roadbed to provide access over a failing culvert at that location. And we have concerns that if we have further major storm activity, that we could lose the bridge. So that's why it was removed for the winter. And once we are at a point in the year where we're comfortable that we don't have further concerns about loss of the culvert, then we will reinstall the bridge.
Traditionally, how early are you able to put that bridge in, or is there hope to do it earlier this year?
Well, the bridge has only been in for a year since the culvert issue occurred. So, excuse me, this is the first time we've removed it. And as I said, we can't predict what storm activity would do to that culvert location. And so, and we don't want to risk losing that bridge. So once we are at a point in the year, presumably sometime probably in April, once we're past the likelihood of major storms, then we would be looking to reinstall the bridge.
My one other question, I guess, is just or request is, Monty, can you just tell us, just for the public's benefit, if someone they are a property owner, just to be very clear, what's the process to fill out that permit if they need to get access to the property?
We have a use at own risk type permit that a property owner or park staff could fill out, and currently there's enough road to get around these washouts. May not stay that way, but as long as it does, someone could squeeze by, they could use the road. Again, if they're a property owner, not if they're just sightseeing, to get up there. So it's essentially, like I said, use at your own risk. People can contact us or directly at the Public Works office to get that from us. We had our prosecuting attorney's office work on that. I got an example from another county years ago, and we tuned that up to work for our county. So there are counties in eastern Washington that they don't maintain roads in the winter. They don't even plow them, but people have cabins up these roads, and they say, well, I mean, if you want to get up there, here's a permit, but if you get snowed in, when it's the Donner Party, it's not the county's fault. So that's kind of the form we borrowed from. So I guess I would add too, there was mention of how long it would take to restore the roads. We can do those projects in a matter of weeks once we have funding. And then
does that include the timing for permits, or you're already putting those permits?
Assuming we have the permits in hand, the contractor could do those projects in 2 to 3 weeks. A contractor, we don't have one selected. And but then we follow up in the spring with final work like paving and guardrail and stuff. But as far as rebuilding the embankment that was lost and restoring at least a gravel surface in the case of the whole road, the Quinault Road already is gravel. It just doesn't take that long to do the work typically.
Did I hear you correctly, Monty, that you're already applying for and processing those permits so that you can be ready when funding comes available? That's great. I think that's important for people to understand.
Fish and Wildlife is a state agency, fairly easy to work with, just because the Army Corps is a little more federally difficult and distant to work with. But we're working with both of those agencies to get emergency permits. Be aware though that all emergency permitting comes with the condition that an unknown amount of after the fact permitting and mitigation will be required for all the work in the river. And that's been the cause of these 10-year plus discussions about what is proper mitigation and how much does it cost and who pays for that. And then in the case of FEMA, not even being able to pay us for the emergency work that's done until those discussions are concluded. And again, we're talking 2015-16 work on the Oil City Road. The river is now a half mile from the road there.
Mitigation continues.
But we're still talking about the mitigation for when we put the rock in the river to restore access to the properties on the Oil City Road. They were completely cut off for 3 or 4 weeks out there, and walking into their properties back in when we did those. At the same time, we did a repair just down the road here at milepost 9.7 on the Upper Hoe Road in 2016. And we got reimbursed relatively quickly from Federal Highways, ER. We knew they were going to fund that project before we did the work. And then when we did the work, we got reimbursed relatively quickly. But we've been
negotiating ever since then, still with the after the fact permitting on that site, and it's still unresolved. We had actually proposed to put some additional log jam armoring just upstream of 9.7 where the current washout is, but that was never approved. We also applied to the Army Corps of Engineers for their program that could potentially do some armoring work, although they've never done that for us before, but they suggested in the process that we apply to their program. I can't remember what it's called, Continuing Authority. And we were denied. We weren't successful. They had 190 applications and they funded a dozen of them, and we were not one of the ones that was funded, even though we had applied, because clearly the road was at risk at that location. So
That was an Army Corps program?
yes, that was an Army Corps program. Federal highways, ER is just what it sounds like, emergency relief. You don't get money to do preemptive things with federal ER money. You have to have a road falling in a river, not the threat of a road falling in the river. And then, of course, we've used federal land access program money, FLAP, but that's not an ER program. And that's what's funded some of the preemptive bank armoring work, but those are 10-year from funding to action type projects. For example, we got funded for federal highways flat money to do a pave and chip seal job on that 12 miles of road, because that's another thing that county cannot afford to do anymore. That was 10 years ago. Obviously, inflation now has made it that project's going to cost a lot more than what we had planned. We didn't think it would take 10 years to do a paving job, but that's the pace that those federal projects move at, because we don't manage the flat projects. Those are managed by federal highways directly. And the people there do great, work and everything, but it's a very backed up, methodical, slow process, and they don't have the staff to handle all their projects either.
Well, hopefully this process isn't gonna take as long as we're hearing all these other processes.
If we get FHWA ER money, we get a commitment, we'll be on our way.
Okay.
But we need those letters from Forks, Clallam County, Park if possible, explaining to our Congress people, senators, and federal highways how important access is at these sites.
Yeah.
For the national.
Talk to commissioners in Clallam County too, and
Yes.
they're ready to support as well. So we should probably draft a template or something that we can get and get those letters out. And I know Rod thought that the city of Forks would be, as he indicated here, supportive of that as well. I mean, should these be federal roads? Can we just, scratch the VIN and leave it to the feds, or?
There was, starting in 2008, we went through a lot of discussions. We had Congressman Norm Dix, Park, Federal Highways, others at the table talking about potential solutions for this road. That was one of them. It wasn't easily possible to do that, because at the time, at least, and I don't know, how, if it changed the federal boundary, whatever it was, but Congress came up with the federal land access program during that time frame, and because of the work we started with Federal Highways and Park and everyone else, we were very successful in getting funding, and then Federal Highways did the project out there. They built a new bridge, they replaced a bridge that was failing, replaced a culvert that was failing, and did a half mile of bank armoring, which some people aren't that happy with because of the way it was done, but that was what it took with the permitting process to get it done.
Well, I think the most important thing here is that we need to spend our time getting the letters of support and organizing ourselves for this funding to make a strong push for the funding. So
We had a public comment about House Bill, he gave the number 10545. I have no idea
continuing
what that's.
resolution.
Yeah.
That's the Is that the program you were talking about?
No, that's the,
So is this another option to explore, or is it something you've already been talking?
That's the one the park was referring to, where they put money in for Hurricane Ridge, but the park. That's new information, relatively new information. I think Kevin explained they didn't really know this.
Yeah, we don't have visibility of what was actually, what's going to be in the final version of that when it comes down to what the park will receive, what the Park Service receives, because it's a very, I don't remember how many pages are in that bill, but it's pretty massive. But there was a section for the National Park Service and disaster money that goes towards the National Park Service with, I believe, some general earmarks, but I don't know that it's direct to projects. So we hope to hear within the next couple of weeks what the final version of the bill says about Hurricane Ridge. But beyond that, I'm not sure what options are available with those funding, with those funds.
So that should be another, just to explore whether there's anything in there for us, and if there are steps we could take to get on the list for those funds as well, and we should be looking at it from as many options.
We are looking at, we've been working on this almost half-time. I have been for the last week,
No
so
doubt.
we're
Saying this one could be
we're
another.
full court press on this, and we are meeting with the park later this week, so.
Great.
It's very difficult. I'm not saying it could never happen, but for the park or a federal agency to spend their money outside of the federal boundary. That's why the Federal Land Access Program was created specifically for access to federal land outside of the boundary. And that's one of the struggles, though, that the Western Federal Lands Federal Highways Office in Vancouver has, is that suddenly they were handed a bunch of new projects outside of the federal boundary. They already did all the work inside the federal boundary without the staff to go along with all that new project work, which is one of the reasons it can take 10 years to get a flat project done. You know, they traditionally did, like when the Hurricane Ridge Road was repaved, that was Western Federal Lands, Federal Highways doing that work, right? They manage those projects for the Park Service inside the federal boundary, but now they're also managing these flat projects outside the federal boundary. But the money doesn't cross that boundary usually. It's inside or outside is a complicated deal.
I appreciate you guys being here this morning. I'm sensitive to the fact that we're about an hour behind on another agenda item, so let's move along on our agenda, and we'll see you guys, most of you, in a couple of days, and Rod will be in touch about a letter, or you can start drafting away. I know what a good writer you are,
It's
so.
on my calendar, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
1:30. Part of that.
Great, that was-
Let us know. We'll come over if we can't come in.
what's the?
After the proclamation, it's either the CBD for the work for the employee town or the beef.
But.
No, let's do the, let's do.
Hearing notice for the CBD. It has to be approved before noon, as long as it's approved before noon.
Let's just stick with our order we have and just keep moving. It's not anyone's fault that we're behind right now. Thanks, you guys. And does everyone have the proclamation open for the reading? Robert, sorry, we're
Yes.
going a little slower than.
Or you can.
We have to hearing notice for that.
Yeah, no, consent agenda, yeah.
Okay, so we have our East Jefferson Fire and Rescue colleague, Robert Wittenberg, with us today to talk about the Community Risk Reduction Week proclamation. Robert, do you want to say anything about this?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Good morning. My name is Robert Wittenberg. I'm the Community Risk Manager for East Jefferson Fire and Rescue. And CRR Week is a national program to promote the awareness of community risk reduction in improving the safety and lives of people, residents in the community, as well as our emergency service providers, including our firefighters. East Jefferson Fire and Rescue is very proud to be working with a number of community service agencies, as well as our local city, county, and state government officials to begin enhancing and promoting some of our prevention programs, including wildfire preparedness, smoke alarm installations, fire extinguisher operation. And we're beginning to promote some additional new elements, including car seat installations, and a number of other programs we're really excited about. So I appreciate you taking the time to issue this proclamation so that we can promote community risk reduction in the area.
Great. Well, let's read the proclamation and let's start at the far end of the dais with Heather. This is this way.
Okay.
And then you run just one way around at a time. Yeah, and yeah, this is your first proclamation, correct?
It is.
Yeah, so this is a big one.
All right, so this is a proclamation about Community Risk Reduction Week. Whereas East Jefferson Fire and Rescue responded to over 6,826 calls for service in 2023, including 102 fire-related calls and 5,095 medical calls. And
whereas Quilcene Fire Rescue responded to over 572 calls for service in 2023, including 23 fire-related calls and 365 medical calls. And
whereas Brennan Fire Department responded to over 536 calls for service in 2023, including 27 fire-related calls and 362 medical calls. And
whereas Discovery Bay Fire and Rescue responded to over 108 calls for service in 2023, including 5 fire-related calls and 103 medical calls. And
whereas most fire-related and many medical calls for service are preventable with an integrated community risk reduction program. And
whereas community risk reduction is a data-informed process to identify and prioritize local risks, followed by integrated and strategic investment of resources to reduce their occurrence and impact. And
whereas the goal of community risk reduction is to reduce the occurrence and impact of emergency events for our community members and our emergency responders through deliberate action in the areas of the 5 E's of education, engineering, enforcement, emergency response, and economic incentive. And
whereas the value of community support from local, county, and state partners to address community risks is recognized to meet the demands on career and volunteer members of the fire service agencies in Jefferson County. And
whereas Monday, January 20th, 2025 is Martin Luther King Day and is nationally recognized as a National Day of Service and an opportunity to reduce the risk in the community through a series of educational and other programs. And
now, therefore, be it resolved that the Jefferson County Commissioners hereby recognize January 20th through the 26th, 2025 as Community Risk Reduction Week to raise awareness of the importance of community risk reduction and an opportunity to make the community safer. Proclaimed this 21st day of January 2025.
I'm happy to move that we approve this proclamation as read.
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
That's a lot of calls.
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
And when I got to the Brennan section, I was like, and then there was that one huge fire.
Yes.
Was that one call?
Yeah.
So,
It's important to recognize that service in the community. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Yeah.
On your teams.
And it's not just in healthcare, but also in risk prevention. Prevention is always cheaper than reacting to it. So anything we can do makes me remember. My mom always tells the story of bringing me home from the hospital in a cardboard box. So it's good. So not everyone knows how to put it in cars. So it's good that you're adding that.
So you can be back.
No, I don't think they were. Not in the olden days.
Road lengthwise across the back of the VDOT van across the country. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do better.
Thank you, Robert, for being here.
Thanks, Robert.
Is there anything on consent that we need to get to this morning?
No, it's just the hearing notice for the Transportation Benefit District.
So that's the next thing on our agenda, so let's go to that next.
Okay.
And who's gonna tee this item up?
So we have Ariel, professor from the PAO office this morning. I will go to her.
Thank you very much. Staff, members of the public. What you have before you today are two items that are related. The first item is a resolution stating the BOCC's intent to assume the Transportation Benefit District. And then the second item is actually setting that hearing, so there can be a public hearing on that topic. The statutory authority for assumption is in RCW 3674, and then the specific procedure is laid out in sections 020 and 030, and they require the legislative authority that created the Transportation Benefit District to give notice of its intent, to set a public hearing, to publish twice prior to the hearing, and then have a hearing. Upon the hearing, to take public testimony, hear pro and con, different reasons for the, or different public testimony for the assumption or against it. And then upon after the hearing, upon that testimony, the Board of Commissioners can state its intent to assume or not. And if it does assume, then the BOCC abolishes the separate governing body of the Transportation Benefit District and assumes all of that power, authority, all of the responsibilities, and becomes able to address and deal with Transportation Benefit District during BOCC meetings and as the BOCC. And so really what it does is it eliminates the need to have separate meetings, separate meeting notices, the separate delineations that were made through an ILA agreement for staff support. All of that can be consolidated, streamlined. What it doesn't do is remove the ability for the TBD to do the TBD business, which is the taxing authority, implement and impose funding revenue for transportation benefit districts and those approved projects. Happy to answer any questions.
So essentially, this is a lean move to make things more efficient. Stacy Prater wouldn't have to maintain an agency fund and send reports to the TBD. It would become a county fund that would be administered as every other county fund. And we wouldn't need to send a billing to the TBD for admin support and that sort of thing. So it's just like regulatory reform and community development. This just is an efficiency measure.
It also addresses some of the public comment that we've received about the TBD using additional funds for overhead. It really makes that much more efficient. I like that about it as well.
And so the reporting for the TBD would just come through our munis standard budget reports. We'd see what the TBD fund was spent on.
Just as a separate line.
Yeah, you lose no visibility over the operation of the TBD or its finances, and Public Works will do the report at the end of the year to the commissioners for TBD activity.
There's no question then why it seems like, I think I saw a percentage of 80% or more of other counties who have TBDs are doing it this way. No separate TBD board assumed by the BOCC.
That's correct.
So we're not gonna keep stopping at 2:30. I was hoping that was like the new 20.
We stop at 2:30.
Okay, yeah, right.
And that was actually very about the more
Right.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So it does seem like, I mean, this is the path that we were going toward, to make this as low overhead and cost as possible.
I appreciate the references to Kaizen.
Yes.
To the lean process. So,
Six Sigma.
Yeah.
Buzzword City.
So this establishes a hearing in a couple of weeks.
27.
The first thing we're doing is the resolution, and then we have the hearing notice.
Okay.
Yeah, we've talked about this. I'm happy to move that we approve a resolution in the matter of a resolution of the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners stating its intent to assume the Jefferson County Transportation Benefit District's rights, powers, functions, and obligations, and setting a public hearing as presented today.
I'll second. And call the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Aye. Okay. Great.
And the hearing notice.
And we're gonna move on to the hearing notice. So you have something else you wanna
Thank you, Chair Eisenhower. I don't have anything else to add. This simply sets the hearing notice for the purpose to consider the assumption that public hearing would occur on January 27th. I believe the time slot is 10 a.m. 10 a.m.
Okay. And the hearing notice will be published Wednesday, January 15th and Wednesday, January 27th.
The two, as you mentioned, 2 notices prior to.
Yes,
Great.
correct.
I'm happy to approve, make a recommendations that we approve a public hearing notice for a public hearing on the transportation benefit district for January 27th, 2025 at 10 a.m. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay,
Moving along.
now you can get that hearing notice out. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are moving on to the next item on our, does anyone need a break?
I could use mine.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and come back at 10:30. Recess till 10:30.
Good.
So
when you
don't get hurt on the merry. Okay, we're all back. We're all back from recess and moving along on our agenda today. We have our workshop on potential action regarding the homeless response system in Jefferson County and consolidated homeless grantee for Jefferson County. We have our esteemed colleagues, Judy Shepherd and Amanda Christopherson with us. And I guess I'm probably handing it over to.
I'm gonna start
Judy.
it, tee it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I just wanna say, when we started on this endeavor, once again, we were approached, I mean, I'm not gonna repeat a lot of what you've already heard through the Housing Fund Board. We felt we had to do some due diligence to make sure that funds were either being spent, how they were being spent. Is there any reason for us to get involved? And not that we saw a huge glaring reason to get involved. However, what it did do is give us an opportunity to look at possibly moving the needle a little more, because funds are consolidated more between 149 funds, the 1590 funds, and then, you know, consolidating maybe some funds together so that we can move that needle with a little more money, right? So bigger pots of money move the needle a little more. And so it was never the intention ever to take money away from Holy Cow, okay? It's just maybe a redirect to where we provide some accountability to how funds are being used, but also let our other partners in the homeless crisis and that are providers in this crisis be able to maybe partner more with the county and achieve our county goals for homeless. And so that was our main reason for even thinking about, do we want to take this on? So and that next slide, if you'll go ahead and tee it up, and that's what this next slide pretty much spoke to. There was, you know, there was no harm meant to be done, okay, or alarm meant, we weren't sounding an alarm bell. It was merely just to say, is this something the county should take on? And that's really the question that's before us today. And so that's all I had to say to tee it up. So Amanda, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to discuss this important program today. I think I'm grateful that you were all present at the Housing Fund Board meeting so that we got oriented to this question. And as Judy stated, our real intention is to do no harm to the housing service providers in our community, to our unhoused neighbors themselves, or to the organization, but only to look at what the intention of the Consolidated Homelessness Grant is from the Department of Commerce in the state of Washington's legislature, which appropriates the funding. And that was the request. The Department of Commerce said, do you want to? And so we had to do our due diligence to answer that question. And in next slide, please. So in doing that, we went to investigate what CHG's what the organization of CHG is and what it was intended for. And, most counties do accept CHG funding and act as the body that coordinates a homeless response system for their county. They subgrant to multiple housing service providers in order to achieve all of the administrative and administrative goals and requirements of the CHG program. Next slide, please. So this next. I'll assume that you've read through these slides to some degree because they were provided in your package, so unless you have questions, I would like this to be somewhat like interactive and like in the moment. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to bring them up.
I do have a couple questions just to start.
Go for it.
Based on what you've said. So, can we just confirm, I think what I'm hearing you say is that the question actually was originated by the Department of Commerce.
That's correct.
Right, so we know that this is a 2-year cycle. Of the continuum of care RFP that goes out, the request for proposals that comes from the Department of Commerce out into communities every 2 years to take on the continuum of care role for a county, correct?
It's not quite an RFP though, right? We have the right to defer, which we have historically done. I don't know if you guys want to go into that history a little bit about why it's always been kind of a.
They do send out an RFP to agencies.
After
the.
Okay, so this is
called
the
a
first
notice of
step.
funding opportunity.
So it's an actual NOFA.
But not yet.
that comes out.
This comes first.
Okay, so the county has always said no, or even maybe not even known that that was an option.
We've known
Just
because,
went.
other service providers in the community, at least when I was chair of before, that was just 3 years ago, came to me and said, we're interested in serving as the administrator of the Consolidated Homes Grant potentially.
So this is the COC. That's my question, correct? Okay. Because we keep referring to this as just the CHG grant, but what we're actually talking about is becoming the COC.
Correct.
And I think that's actually been confusing to the agency.
What's the COC?
That's the Continuum of Care Agency. That's what the NOFA is for every 2 years, is to become the COC, which means you are the one providing all the oversight.
Yep.
But we've been characterizing this as the county receiving the CHG grants, but that's not what we're talking about necessarily. We would be the administrator of it. And so we need to decide, but that does mean we would have some of the administrative funds in order to administer that.
Yes.
And so we need to understand the impact of an agency, OLICAP, not having those administrative funds. Is that correct? The kind of characterization of where we are and what we're considering?
Yes,
Okay.
so and I'll go, this is sort of later, I was planning on talking about this later, but I have talked with Apple Martin. And historically, and our peers do commonly hold the COC in public health departments, and
Our peers, other
historically,
counties.
other counties.
Which have more of a human services department, which now public health is, building up in a way that they really haven't before. Can I just speak to one thing that Heidi said, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but she talked about other agencies asking to be the COC, and that is not ever responsibility we have. It's not our NOFO. It's if we defer, Commerce issues the NOFO and makes the determination based, and any other agency could apply. And OLICAP has been traditionally the only applicant, and at least I think still has been the only applicant. I just wanted to get that out of the record. So
Yeah, no, it was in response to that having been posted that someone approached me.
Okay.
Yeah, so
But we would receive, even as the COC, we're gonna receive the CHG funds.
Yes.
yeah,
The
it
county.
goes. They go.
One of the things you administer.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you want to hold the conversation about, so I think one thing that Amy Howard brought up in the Housing Fund Board meeting, and Holly Morgan brought it up again today, is that, in order to do this effectively without doing harm to the entire system, we really do need to understand, have a good plan for where this would be housed and how it would be operated, and whether or not the capacity is there in the county to take on,
the leadership of the continuum of care and with partnership from the Housing Fund Board and all of our housing
Providers.
and all of our housing service providers. So, I don't know if you want to talk about this aspect now or later.
It might be easier for you guys to just continue through your presentation, but I do think we want to table the question of what else does the COC do, the Continuum of Care Agency, and do we have capacity for that, or do we talk about?
That comes here.
Parts of that.
So I think that, these are the goals that as sort of Judy and I envision them, and as I understood them from Commerce for a COC or CHG lead grantee, to hold accountability for the performance of our homeless response system, to work collaboratively with all housing service partners, providers, and funders, to produce accurate data that results in informed decisions, to, control finance in order to provide for the best performance of the system. Are there any other goals that you Board of County Commissioners would like to highlight?
I think the data and reporting ones are really important.
And that's where Vicky's coming.
Yeah, I mean, how do we know the effectiveness of the programs in our community if there's not reporting on those on an annual or biannual basis? And it feels like my questions largely revolve around capacity. It's like, where do we, it makes sense to have an oversight function to me. It makes sense with a lot of things, not just this, but in structuring leadership for endeavors, community-wide endeavors, it makes sense to have an unbiased or unobligated advocate.
Unbiased.
One
Yeah.
step from the service
Yeah,
provider.
yeah.
Exactly.
But what, I guess my question, I mean, I'm going down in the weeds, but how much capacity do we need to actually do an effective job at that? And what kind of capacity is that? And I'm not saying I want us to spend time writing a job description here, but it really feels important to have the conversation about what kind of leadership is needed for all of these critical industries in our community. So that we're actually crafting if we're considering doing this, we're actually meeting the needs of all the providers in our community.
And I think that's Holly's point, is that this is really fast to be making a decision without fully vetting that. So we just have to either just do that really quickly. We have to look into it deeply enough to make a decision about this.
The deadline's 20th.
Yeah.
So
I think you said at some point that you had reached out to the other housing providers in your message to us in your brief.
I have been reaching out to other peers who hold consolidated. Other counties.
Okay.
I haven't, other than speaking to the Housing Fund Board, we haven't consulted with any other housing service providers.
It'd be really important to hear from, because they're the victim service provider. So they are part of that continuum of care. They're a required element of, the full, we have to have an assigned VSP, victim service provider, and Dovehouse is that for us. So they would be very involved in this process, and they, I think they also are deeply affected, have clear opinions about how things were with previous administration at OLECAP and their perspective on how things are now. And what the hope, sort of hope for this, for improvement in the future. I feel like it would be really good.
We do have the ED of Dovehouse in the audience, and we're not gonna have a back and forth, but.
And Apple, our public health director, has been asked to be brought over as a panelist, so we should do that, because they'll have a role in this. So Apple, hi Apple, good morning.
Morning, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Would you like me to say something, or can I answer a question for you specifically? I am aware, Amanda and I have talked, and I just wanted to be available to you to think through it and to provide some compassion around the topic. It's a challenging one. And I realize that I'm thinking through how to hold this funding and where it spreads out to. And obviously Heather has a very astute understanding of sort of the continuum of care concept with regard to this type of funding. I'm not going to make any assertions here. I'm here in support to figure out what is the right decision. I also think that she is additionally right in sort of what is the surveying capacity we have to understand who best really can do that. What is the bandwidth across our community? And while public health, and I can only speak from my department's lens, while we touch on many, many important critical issues relative to the unhoused population, we are not a housing agency. We have had, just for historical context, and I'll be brief, public health and social services, human services have often been married within the same department across counties, across the state. We had a sort of breaking of that and output of human services work to the community some years ago, so that public health as a department didn't hold those services unto themselves. We did retain things like intellectual and developmental disabilities program coordination for the county, and more newly coordinating behavioral health programming, especially and specifically the 1/10 of 1% funding that's dedicated to doing that type of work. But we no longer have a human services bona fide component in a big way as part of public health department, like other public health departments in other jurisdictions in other counties. That doesn't mean that we don't have a totally vested interest in it, and that we don't already collaborate in a multitude of ways that are impactful and relevant and important, especially in the continuum of care. So I'm here to listen to your all's debate about it and to understand that, you know, maybe there is a housing coordinator position that is needed at the county. I may be jumping way ahead. I don't know. It sounded to me like, first and foremost, OLICAP has received this funding in the past, and I'm here to listen to how funneling those funds through Department of Commerce to our county should be considered. Do you have any specific questions for public health relative to this conversation?
Yeah, but I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Which, I mean, I hear you articulating separating public health from this role. Is there any interest in this role within public health in terms of if we had a housing office, having the housing office housed with you? Or, I mean, I am the least engaged in the housing conversations in this community, which maybe affords me the luxury of asking the questions that, you know, whatever comes to my mind. And I'm not going to ask a lot of it because I don't like wasting people's time, but
I would propose that we could consider that. We are having, okay, there's two things happening at once. I don't know that we'd be I don't know what we would bring to it more than what OLICAP has brought to it. I mean, obviously, we all have our areas of expertise, and our areas of expertise are quite vast, honestly. I'm not vying for this specifically, but I want to be part of the solution. And I understand, you know, that it does make a lot of sense for public health to hold a housing staff person or a housing unit, and for funds to flow through the public health department in a jurisdiction. So I'm offering just the awareness that it's important that these funds be received and then utilized and distributed in equitable and important ways. And if you all believe that it needs to be held within the county, if we need to be the lead agency instead of another housing agency or what has been OLICAP in the past, then, you know, we will consider that. I just want you also to know, for context, that public health has grown a lot in 2 years. we're at an overcapacity for the size of our department and the space that we inhabit. As we've grown over the last 2 years with foundational public health services money, which is not specifically about housing, it's about a lot of things. We have, we've sort of hit the hilt of our growth to the degree that we can hold the growth that we've recently done. We also have budget cuts that are coming from the state with the change in administration and the impacts of the fiscal forecast on the State Department of Health and the main way that we receive a lot of the funds here at Public Health. And I realize the grant you're talking about is funding that we could expect to use to pay FTE or whatever it is we decide to do. But I am at the crossroads of being maxed out in terms of the size of our department and our bandwidth, with oncoming, dismal financial forecasts that we'll have to respond to and figure out the best way to continue to provide all of our services that are important in a stricter budget sense, compared to the last few years. So I'm not opposed to public health taking this on. It is logical if we were to retain it in the county as far as county work and be the lead agency. It does make sense that public health would hold this. It's a complicated decision to make.
I can also see, one thing that I've desired from a potential future housing office for the county is somebody who's focused on policy. Because when I went to my first LLC meeting last week in Olympia, it's not lost on anybody at that table that housing, whether you're a tiny east side ag county or, a big metro like Pierce County, housing is front burner, pot boiling over issue in all of our communities. And it feels like the legislature is going to be noodling with policy and funding on this issue for the next forever, probably. But right now it's really the number one issue. I feel like that I hear the potential for us to really get some collaborative good progress forward on as a county's family. And so I would like to see this person or this role be focused on that as well, is knowing what the top 3 pieces of legislation that are moving in, what do we need to advocate beyond the tools that exist in the toolbox for our homeless response. So anyway, I'm gonna stop because these are my wake up in the middle of the night thoughts. I'm not the one sitting at the table that you guys are.
I absolutely agree with you, Heidi, that the policy aspect of it is a major portion of what this role or this unit would really need to be concerned with, because there are policies right now that are either being written or being revised that impact our immediate on the ground usage of the tiny amount of homelessness funds that we get through foundational public health services. So we're already in a bind not having some of these policy issues worked out. And they're reasonable and understandable that they exist, but they also have to be worked on. And it's that policy work, you're right, it would be probably better held by someone who has that expertise and background. So a lot of things to consider.
I would say that Clallam County has housing staff in their Board of County Commissioners office, as well as in their human services, public health human services. And lots do, because there's a difference between affordable housing development and homeless system response system. So
very big.
It is a really big issue. I think we do have some DCD staff who've taken on some of it a little, just, whether specifically, given that title or not. As grants administrator, I've done a little bit of, not policy work, of course, but development of grants to support housing, but it would behoove our county just to get some expertise, to develop our expertise. Please need to advance to the next slide. So I filled
the next slides with, really specific items regarding the administrative requirements of our COC or CHG lead. And some of them would be performed by staff here, and some of them would be performed and provided by our subgrantees as identified. In talking with peers, a lot of peers subgranted considerable amounts of this administrative requirements. Are there any questions about the administrative requirements?
Yeah, I think it should be noted that if the county hired a housing coordinator, that function would be 100% overhead. And it would not result in direct benefit to the intended recipients of these funds.
Right.
And you would add that layer of overhead to the layers of our subgrantees.
Well, it would, but it wouldn't, sorry. I mean, it would benefit the population.
It could. I mean, I'm struggling. I mean, okay, so they're gonna develop policy, like, what's an example of a policy that would benefit the end user? I don't know, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the role.
That would be more than, their role would be more than that, but yeah, I mean, I think.
Yeah, I kind of think that their role is to provide accountability for the housing homeless response system provider and net landscape as a whole for our county, and to coordinate the homeless system response with all of our housing system providers taken into account. Whether or not you think that could continue to best be performed by one of the housing providers is the question.
Can I come back to a question I know I have asked multiple times, and I apologize, I'm gonna ask it again. I've asked it of the providers, or OLICAP. And today they did in their public comment give a few details around where exactly do those CHG dollars go. Viola Ware said that she specifically said that some of the CHG and EHF, Emergency Housing Fund dollars, were used by OLICAP. And Viola, if you're listening, can send me a comment if I get this wrong, but used by OLICAP to fund unfunded operations at Caswell Brown Village. To be clear, that's not specific enough for me. It bothers me that we can't ask the question and get a really clear answer. So about exactly where each dollar goes for these CHG funds, and that speaks to the accountability.
And that's part of the challenge.
Right.
As a numbers person myself, I struggle with that.
Yeah.
We have struggled for a number of years with OLICAP being able to provide data as far as where money is being spent, how it's being spent, getting into the specifics. And then coming off of the last 2 years where it was, I mean, we still don't have any reporting really of what happened in the last 2 years.
Okay.
And so, this information that Amanda brought up, I believe, isn't this from CHG, from Commerce?
The one above this is from Commerce. This is data that OLICAP. So this is the budget for the different CHG programs that were funded in the last biennium, and the spending as of 12/31. And so, all of the admins in each of the programs, you can see CHG admin, and admin, eviction prevention admin, and FCS admin, and EHF. Those are all, they go straight to OLICAP for salary. Well, no, salaries, human resources, as she said. Here we have OLICAP provided us data from their own accounting system showing what amount. So the blue line at the second to bottom, that's the admin going straight to OLICAP's operation of their entity. On the top, you see OLICAP broke out what's called operations, and that includes rent and facilities that they pay for that are OLICAP facilities. So
may or
operations.
may not be part of their CHG programs. We don't.
The only direct services funding is down at the very bottom. So their accounting software broke out all of the payment of utilities, all of the office supplies purchased, all of the equipment, all of the IT services, all of those rent facilities, all of those things, and they call that in their own accounting software currently operations. And that totaled the $227,384. Of that, 68% of operations is for rent and facilities payments on their own offices and facilities in Port Angeles and Port.
So I don't want to be clear about why I'm asking this for this level of detail. I mean, and I've just come from this world and I know how difficult it is to fund these organizations. And this is the concern that I have in the county taking this on. I know that these dollars don't pay for what is actually being done out there. I know that the CHG dollars don't actually cover what OLICAP is doing in CHG, what Bayside is doing with their CHG programs. I know that those two organizations at least, and I know this is true with funding that's provided from other sources to other organizations like Dove House, that they are then subsidizing with other things to just do the things that they tell us they're doing with these dollars. I know that from experience. So it worries me to take this on as the county, thinking that we're gonna get this great other thing out of it, when it's actually, the dollars actually aren't fully funding the thing we think they're funding anyway. So that's my biggest concern. On the other side of that, I also completely understand why we're looking at this. It has not been done well. The people who are in this room today acknowledge that, and it's why they're new, jumping into it. Their expertise is the kind of expertise we need now, and I do have a lot of confidence in the actual people to do this work. And I'm really grappling with this because I think, how can you oversee yourself? That's tough, especially when you're overseeing things like accountability and and collaboration with other organizations. OLICAP has not, prior to this new administration, collaborated well with other organizations. They didn't have to. They were the main provider at the time, right? So they weren't used to collaborating with other organizations. Now, I'm going to say that with a really big caveat, because they do on many, many levels. I'm speaking specifically about providing housing. Now there are other players in the field now, as in the last 10 years, right? So they have to, they're learning how to collaborate. And this on housing specifically, where they have collaborated in many, many ways in other areas. The fact that another agency, a non-OLICAP agency, has to go to OLICAP to kind of pry around and figure out, like, okay, are there any dollars in here for me, for this agency, so a non-OLICAP agency? That was a really big problem. I know there are providers in this community who just flat out stopped asking because they could not get through and they could not get the support. Now, I think that is changing with this new administration. And so there's a big part of me that says, this is too fast. Leave it with OLICAP, but give them much more specific accountability and reporting requirements, specifically around these leadership and finance requirements and the data requirements that Vicki Sontag is heading up in our data and needs assessment committee to the Housing Fund Board. I think there are ways that we could get very, very specific and clear about what they need to report and how they need to collaborate with others. I think that's where I am right now in my head, and I still have a lot of other questions, but.
Can I ask a question on this one before you leave it? It's not clear, sorry.
No, please.
On the light blue, the two light blue lines, the rent and facilities, there's that 154, 416, 68% of operations. Are those lines a subset of the yellow line above?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
What I was gonna say is I pretty much agree with you, Heather, and also with Vicky and you guys that systemically, I think it makes sense for the county to be the COC. I think with this pace, we're not quite ready. I mean, public health is the appropriate place, but we don't have anything built up there, you know, they're going through flux as well. And I really do think we risk throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we make this abrupt change that in 6 months, we might lose some real services that OLICAP does provide with this. But I also think that a year and a half is going to come in no time, right? And that's really what we're talking about. So I mean, like, to me, planting the flag and say, our intention is to be the COC at the next time this comes around. Let's talk about have these conversations about data and transparency now. And start working through the system, start not building our capacity, but building that space in our capacity to take this on as using Housing Fund Board with public health and kind of create the space to not just maybe start talking about policy in that context, but also to build up to taking the admin reins, but give OLICAP, a year and a half to kind of build their own systems so that the change isn't so disruptive internally.
Yeah, it was quite a threat. It's quite a threat that OLICAP has laid on us.
Yeah.
And no one do no harm. No one wants to do harm.
No, yeah, and I know that wasn't the intention, as Judy forewarned, foreshadowed this conversation, no one wants to do that. And we can all recognize that there have been some real transparency issues and some, as you say, the landscape of providers has really changed in the last couple of years, and I don't think OLICAP provides the most room for all the service agencies at this point. So I think it is good to have this conversation, and I would really be comfortable planting the flag now that we intend the next time this comes around for the 27 biennium, that the county should be the COC, and let's work with our partners to make sure that we all understand what that means and that we all agree what that should entail.
And that we do it without losing service.
Yes.
That we do it with the intent of growing our capacity, not losing any service that we have now in the community. And that's gonna take a lot of conversation. I will also just say, it really is influential to me to, I see our staff at the county, these issues with the roads are really relevant as a comparison right now. We have staff working so hard and constantly being told that they're not doing enough. And I see that in the faces of the people from OLICAP right now. They're just getting started. They're trying to do their best. They're bringing a level of expertise that is quite brilliant and has potential.
No, I've been very impressed.
And at the same time, we can't afford as a system to not look at the same. We have to be more efficient, and we have to find a better way to manage the system. Data, accurate tracking, and accountability are essential, and we just have to get there.
And we do some of the COC tasks right now with the 5-year housing plan that we're redoing. This year is the first fundamental overhaul of the 5-year plan since the Housing Fund Board kind of took it on in the first place.
So we're seeing one of the low barrier, maybe, well, that's actually not the only low barrier project.
Right, yeah.
Bayside has one, and it could go.
Yeah, but we have, as you say, we have stepped into the shelter field in a way that we have not previously. So the game is changing, and I think recognizing that and just a little bit of a longer horizon, I think would be make sure that we do no harm.
Yes.
I just wanna go over these, so this slide was not included in your package,
Oh, right.
this is conversations with peers.
Oh, yeah, this is helpful.
I did have a conversation with Pacific County that isn't included here, but. I spoke with Skagit County and Grace Harbor County, both of which are larger than ours. Both of which hold this continuum of care in their public health departments. In Skagit County, which is much larger, they have 3 staff, 20 sub-grantees. They pool CHG funding with DRF, some behavioral health, 1% funds, and additional grants from, the balance of state option to access federal funding, as well as funding from, some courts programming and additional funds that they look for, which I'm sure OLECAP does as well. Their housing service providers still have issues with operations and maintenance of property, of course. And they have an organization called North Star, which connects all of the fragmented entities, including emergency service providers, public health providers, all substance use providers, all different kinds of entities, cities, because they have multiple cities and county, and all of their housing service providers to really communicate and collaborate. So they do have some entity, some collaboration organization outside of just their CHG staff within the county. They are currently working with a consultant named Tenfold in order to determine how to move forward across the entire system with anticipation of reduced funding. So, they are actually really looking at how to optimize their homeless response system, knowing that it's difficult to do across all these housing service providers. I thought the most interesting thing they told me was their coordinated entry intakes are completed by Volunteers of America of Western Washington using a 211 hotline. So
Wow.
I thought that was pretty cool. Grace Harbor County, which is a little bit more, a little bit smaller, also has it in their public health department. They have said communication is the key. Communications with grantors, sub-grantees, and task force, constant. They talked about monthly auditing of quality assurance, data, training, constantly providing training to all of their housing service providers so that they understand and can accurately enter data into HMIS, because it's tricky. It's a federal database that is very complicated, complex, and changing. So they constantly are going to their sub-grantees and offering training in data entry. They also have a housing task force and a think tank associated with this topic of all kinds of folks. They have only 3 service providers in their community. Coastal CAP is one of their most prominent providers. They use a lot of funding with the courts from the therapeutic court, and they signed an even greater pool of funding to pull from to beef up their homeless response system. They use their Coastal CAP as their CE for coordinated entry intake. And yeah, I think I just was so impressed with their their auditing of their sub-grantees is not to catch a sub-grantee, it's to offer a sub-grantee support. And to make sure that they're aware of there's a lot of new regulatory requirements coming out of CHG for by and for organizations to make sure that they're performing and allowing for participation and influence of by and for communities. So that'll be a real new transformation of how this work goes, and the low barrier. There's a lot of transformation in terms of CHG funding for low barrier systems and families support systems. So it's it's a large body of work. This is no small body of work. And I was really impressed with how generous all of our peers were with sharing their knowledge. And I'm sure that OLECAP does, they didn't talk to us about it yet, but I'm sure that they do participate in Department of Commerce annual meetings for all CHG league entities, and they could probably speak to why they've made the choices. OECAP could speak to why they've made the choices they've made in terms of administration of CHG.
I almost expected OLICAP to just be relieved when we brought this topic up. You know, that was partly. And what, you know, my first thought was, oh gosh, they'll be so glad not to have to do this part, right? They'll keep, you know, be able to fund their low barrier programs with CHG dollars, but not have to do all of the COC work. And of course, that's not how they felt. And I want to honor that. And at the same time, I think, well, if we for example, tasked the Housing Fund Board with saying, okay, establish the accountability measures for the COC, be the one to receive those reports and, you know, and report to the Board of County Commissioners about whether you know, if OLICAP is the COC for this next biennium. I think, does OLICAP, I mean, we're talking about does the county have the capacity? Does OLICAP really have the capacity to actually do all the things that a COC needs to do? They're already struggling to do, you know, just like all the agencies, to provide the basic service, the direct service that you're talking about, Mark. So, you know, your comment, Amanda, about, you know, grantees auditing sub-grantees, not with the intent of catching them, but of supporting them. That would be the attitude the Housing Fund Board would have to be, you know, have with OLICAP is, okay, we're up in the game, guys, for the whole system. That means if you're taking on the COC, you need to meet these accountability measures, but we're not here to catch you doing it wrong. We're here to make sure you have all the support that you need in order to support the other agencies and the whole system. And that's going to take a big lift from all of us.
Yeah, we heard from Holly this morning. If this funding goes away, the agency, I think, becomes crippled.
That's what I still don't understand the dollars of that. I would really like to see what they actually, what do you mean? Which dollars would be removed from which non-CHG programs? I really would love to be able to dig into that. And I think we should be able to with a COC.
Well, in addition to that, I mean, you speak of resources from elsewhere that supplement these funds. How would they pay rent? How would they take care of their facilities? How would they pay their salaries?
Exactly.
So
we need to understand that, because these numbers don't necessarily, you know, nobody's talking about taking the CHG dollars away from OLICAP.
Programmatic.
Right. So the programmatic dollars, thank you. So why is it that if you're not responsible for the administration part, but the county is, but you're still getting the programmatic dollars, you've lost a responsibility that you no longer have to pay for and still have the funding for the programs? But that is clearly not how they feel.
Well, I think they're in a scarcity mode, right?
Yeah.
That they're losing support.
Right.
With
I'd like to
this
see
conversation.
Clearly in numbers, in a collaborative way that doesn't feel threatening to OLICAP, but is really all of us rolling up our sleeves going, okay, let's look at this. Well, let's really understand how the system is working. We have no question, and we're not threatening you or the way you're doing your work. We need to understand how the system is functioning and where there can be efficiencies.
I mean, what do we need to do in the next 18 months to build the runway to take on the COC role? That's my question. Do we need to carve out some of this for our building the capacity to be an effective administrator of these funds? I feel like the answer is yes, but maybe I'm asking for a luxury.
Or do we need to find other funds for that? I don't know if there
I think it's a collaborative conversation. I think that is, if that's the kind of horizons we can do it with our existing capacity, you know, bringing public health a little bit more involved, the Housing Fund Board, having those conversations, making that, I mean, that's the table that we can further this conversation and think where we can.
It's basically a lean process that we need to go through for the whole system. And I just want to say too, this is so much progress that we're having this conversation. I mean, having come from the provider side of this, it was very frustrating that from the provider side, we couldn't really look at the whole system. We wanted to be part of, I think I can speak for all these providers on this particular thing. They want to be part of a whole system that is serving the population that they intend to serve, and that is collaborating with one another, and that is working to its maximum capacity. They all want that. I know you want that. So, if we can move in that direction by leaning out this process, then that's huge progress from where we were just 2 years ago.
As an example, at the Shelter Coalition, we've been starting to talk about, well, what happens after June, and OLCAP has a plan for rescoping Cuggle Brown phase 3 to fill that space, and there's questions and design questions that we're fielding there. You'll had some questions for the last Shelter Coalition, and I talked to OLCAP and said, let's have this design conversation now with everyone there. And I think if we have, a kind of a standing housing fund board blank and a committee that's dedicated not just to data and needs, but also to, kind of the COC conversation, asking those questions, that it's hard to get these answers and to ungrade everything, too. And we've always been concerned about, or I've been concerned about some of our COC dollars or CHG dollars going to Clallam County rents and things like, that are not quite maybe serving the problems in Jefferson County. So kind of laying that to bear at that table would be a way that we can start having these conversations and unwrap it a little bit.
And the Board of County Commissioners has requested that OLCAP provide report out on all of their services.
Yeah.
And I think one of the public comments today did sort of highlight the, issue with some of their public services, like LIHEAP not being able to access some of those systems. And so, understanding more what, how CHG funding is going to support all of those programs, if that is the case or not, would be helpful for our county and all of its providers to understand better, like how we can support and fill gaps where OLCAP just simply cannot do it. They don't have the bandwidth, and that's understandable. Our county and its needs have grown a lot in the last 6 years, however long, 5 years. And it's understandable that one human services provider is not able to cover all of this.
And I'd be remiss again, as the OLCAP board member on the, OLCAP's taken a few hits. We've talked about the rebirth of OLCAP with a lot of new staff, new leadership, but there's been other grants they've lost, senior nutrition, SSVF, and each one of those comes with a capacity hit as well that, which would compound that. And, we want to make sure that OLCAP is still there providing services. And I take them at their word when I like, there could be real harm done to the organization, just another hit. So like a little time, a little grace for OLCAP, I think is not just due for the good service they provided, but also would benefit those services downstream.
I don't want it to get lost too, though, that we're gonna have to really up our game around it, requiring accountability. And that is gonna create work for an already stressed organization, which means we have to support them to provide that accountability and to really say, whatever we discover in finding these accountability measures means we all need to work on the solution. This isn't just about, everybody pointing the finger at OLCAP.
So if the CHG funds stay with OLCAP, would we, because there's OLCAP CHG funds that are not being spent and have historically not been being spent, would we make a stipulation that other providers have an opportunity to get a bite of those funds? And if so, is OLCAP going to be the only one making that decision? I mean, if they're the lead grantee, they're getting the money. And so what I'm concerned about is, let's say we take the 18 months to figure this out to be the COC. However, what does this mean for our other housing providers that are providing these services within our community. And how is OLICAP able to, as a lead grantee, being a provider, say, oh, well, we now, we can take 500,000 of this and we can give it. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, or do you just say it's the mode of operation as it has been for the next 18 months, where OLICAP is receiving all those funds and using them?
I think that becomes part of the accountability regime.
Yeah.
And, one thing, once you decide today on what to do with these dollars, whether to let OLICAP be the lead.
Just to defer, we don't actually get to choose the lead.
Apple, I see your hand up.
I simply wanted to tag on Heather's assertion about supporting OLICAP for this next 18 months. And through doing that, you have to think about what those logistical and tactical efforts are that are called support, because that word is it's defined differently in different people's heads. But what I can suggest is that support from the county for them to succeed, which is the do no harm and the supportive extension of trying to help the lead agency, in this case OLICAP, for the next term, do well by it and to absorb all of their internal changes, which are for the better. We can offer things, and I can't volunteer anyone other than myself, but public health has the ability now to do quite rigorous assessment of programming through our epidemiologists. Amanda is quite astute at contracting if there were subawardees. I mean, there are ways that the county, and I'm not volunteering anyone and I don't want to be seen as that, but what I'm saying is, in response to Heather's comment, what do we do collectively? What do we pitch in the ring to support OLICAP to do well by these funds beyond their own self-improvement that they're trying to do with the change in administration?
All Apple, thank you.
And logistically, does it need to be formalized somehow in like a memorandum of understanding, or it feels like it to me?
Yeah, between the housing fund board. So to answer your question with a question that I'm not sure that I know the answer to, Judy, because that's really, really important what you're saying. It's the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about, is the actual dollars. And so what I don't know is there any reason why the Housing Fund Board can't require a presentation like other funding boards, like Behavioral Health Advisory Committee, for example? They'll put out their RFP and people will request the dollars. There's a process for assigning those, deciding who wins those dollars, and those get presented.
And there's a very detailed report that comes back to the BHAC about the use of those dollars.
Yep. So I would say that could we explore? I don't think there's anything out there, RCW or Department of Commerce regulation, that says could the Housing Fund Board say when the round of housing or consolidated homeless grant dollars
are being
is
budgeted.
available? Yeah.
Because but the COC determines the budget for the new CHG year.
Right.
And so they determine how much goes into operations and how much goes into direct service and how much,
Can that process be done at the Housing Fund Board? OLICAP makes their recommendation, because they would do the majority of the work, but they bring that to the Housing Fund Board, and the Housing Fund Board here's their proposal, here's who we think should get the dollars. And then that's a conversation. I'd like to know whether there's anything out there that says we couldn't do with that.
I don't think we have authority to dictate once we defer.
Right.
But we can make that request.
If they're awarded, the grant, then we can bring them in and.
Yeah, the Housing Fund Board. I mean, we've had the same intention with Housing Fund Board, when we did go out and do field trips and everything. I will say the big difference between the BHAC and the Housing Fund Board is that we take some of the BHAC dollars and we pay for staff.
Right.
So we have staff capacity that can manage that, follow up, and we've never had that with the Housing Fund Board, and that lack of capacity has downstream.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Well, some kind of, and I don't mean to add process or, any kind of onerous agenda to this. It would just be basically some way to make this kind of distribution of dollars a more transparent process, because it has not been transparent.
And I think that's where,
remotely
I mean, Viola talked about putting that consortium of providers together, and I think we can. Work with them, make space at the Housing Fund Board, encourage them to come to the Housing Fund Board, and I'm planting my flag that come the next time it comes around, I want to plan to, unless some better plan comes up in our planning, that the county not defer the next time it comes around.
Well, then there needs to be capacity to do that planning that you're talking about.
We do meet at the Housing Fund Board where we're talking about a way to get only cap, I'm sorry?
Use DRF funds. You could grant yourself DRF funds to build capacity.
We could diminish the awards, like Behavioral Health Advisory Committee does, and pay for that capacity that way. So that's how we can do it. I mean, that's a conversation for the Housing Fund Board first, but yeah, that's a good idea. We've always been hesitant to do that because CHAC is oversubscribed every time. All of our funding organizations or funding streams are oversubscribed, but.
So how do we get at Judy's astute comment of the funds left at on the table? Is that part of this transition capacity conversation? How to get those out on the street?
You had a.
Yeah, every cycle.
150 or something out of the million.
Sometimes more than that, but I think they're working towards spending it down more. Viola's comment, and I think it's probably true, is that there was a real spike during COVID of the funds available, and the capacity to spend funds you don't really know are coming can be a little difficult, but if you go up,
because funds come with
obligation. Oh, no.
Just to get through to Jefferson, they have 750,000 that they need to spend.
So I can give some insight into the dollars that were given back, about 150,000 by Bayside, because I know exactly what happened there. And this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. So, and this is totally not talking out of school. I've said this directly to Viola. She knows and is very sympathetic to the situation. Eviction prevention dollars, when a previous housing manager was in that role, they put out their call for their budget, right? And assigned, then came to Bayside and said, hey, Bayside, we got you some eviction prevention dollars. And Bayside said, oh, okay, great. We don't really know what eviction prevention dollars do. We don't have an eviction prevention program.
They didn't provide you training on the CHG to understand what eviction prevention programming would look like?
Correct. Not until later when, and actually we never really fully got there, and that was a capacity issue. The bottom line is these dollars come with responsibilities to establish a program that have other costs, right? So ultimately, Bayside decided OCAP already has an eviction prevention program. Why duplicate and create more administrative burden for two organizations to do it? We never asked for these dollars in the first place. So, and we decided collaboratively toward the end with Viola that, they didn't have the capacity to train. We didn't have the capacity. Bayside didn't have the capacity to establish a program. So those kinds of things could really be avoided by communicating upfront. Is where should these dollars go? Is this an organization that actually has this program, or would they have to create the program? Have they agreed to create the program? Those kinds of basic lean systems can really.
That's the responsibility of the CHG lead.
That is the responsibility of a CHG lead. And this was an organization that did not have that capacity at the time.
Yeah.
And the question is, do they now? And or alternatively, does the county have that capacity? It has to be built in one place or the other. So,
I mean,
So maybe it would have been more appropriate, emergency housing funding, if you're operating emergency housing.
emergency housing funding is something that OLECAP administered through that same cycle.
Yeah.
So that's actually what funded Bayside
they
Tower.
did, they got a
last.
176 or something.
Yep.
right? So I mean,
That was great.
it did
Yeah.
distribute some of those funds, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, we're not gonna fix the system right now, right? I guess, I don't know if you're ready for a motion. I think the conversation will continue. I think Housing Fund Board is probably where this should continue, and it's great to have Heather's experience as a service provider in the service provider agency to really flesh that context out. I think that's, we'll need to talk about it here more too, and we're gonna have OLECAP back, but if you're ready for a motion, I'm happy to make a motion. I would move that we this time defer the opportunity to act as the COCD as Jefferson County.
I would second that.
All in favor of the motion?
I,
Do you have to designate OLECAP as?
We don't have the ability. Commerce does that.
thank you, which does it. I also want to say thank you to both of you guys. The amount of research that you've done to bring this to the table is also puts us in a position to understand this and to start preparing in a way that I've never seen before. So, and the fact that you reached out to peers is going to be so helpful. Can you send us that additional slide that has the peer input, Amanda? Because I'd love to dig into that. I think we have the rest of the presentation, but.
Oh.
So I have a plan to talk with Pacific County and I can put that on the slide deck too, because they're more commensurate, they're
Okay.
similar
Similar
size.
size, yeah,
Okay, this is, it's been great, and this is the beginning of the conversation.
it
so
really
appreciate
is
it.
an important one.
Thank you guys.
I'm really grateful for your time and I think that, and your deliberation, I think it was really thoughtful and considerate. And I do think that this is a very good outcome, honestly. I do believe that this is a good outcome for doing no harm to any of our homeless housing service providers. And, moving forward with slowing down, as Commissioner Eisenhower often says, and doing things here. So I'm really grateful for the time.
Thank you, and thanks for all the public comment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Send me the slide.
Okay, so we have one item left on our agenda this morning, but we also have consent and any calendaring briefing.
And I have one more item to throw on, sorry, sometime today that I neglected to bring up last week, a letter of support for the Olympic National Forest. I'll do it this afternoon quickly, but we do have Diane McDade with us, so if we start with the agenda item and invite Diane to join Mark at the table. I can tee this off. So, I've been kind of bird dogging the aquatic facility and I've just to kind of give a little bit of context to this is, we're talking about using some of the $20,000 LTAP award that was for this purpose to, start doing the data collection that we know is part of the programming precedes design aspect that we got. I just want to talk about a few other things too, like we've talked about as one of our legislative asks. I've taken the lead on drafting a legislative or a local community project ask. And one thing that as Diane and I were talking about the survey came out is that we should probably, as the BOCC, narrow down those two locations that the task force this summer suggested, both the either the county-owned property across from H.J. Carroll Park or the property on the Chimicum Creek Elementary property between Mason Street and the library. We've also started talking about, and I've started on that, so I have a meeting next week or on the 22nd with Superintendent Mock. I reached out to the library and Habitat as well to kind of flesh out those options, but one of the criteria, in my understanding of the LCP request that I know we need to get in soon is site control. So I want to understand if we can achieve site control for that second location and then bring back those options. And I'll even bring back the other options that we consider just for the BOCC's consideration. But I do think that selecting a site, not that a public facilities district couldn't go in a different direction, but choosing one site as we move forward is our preferred alternative, will allow us to apply for that LC. The survey, I know that, Diane, you sent a draft of it. Is it okay for me to share that PDF file as we go through it? And then I think, one thing that we discussed is making sure that this applied for it was, in the vein of the LTAC award, is talking about kind of the tourist element that I believe is a real, possibility. And I'll let Diane talk about the kind of the bifurcated survey as we go through it. And then it would be great, Diane, as you talk us through this process and what you've done with the PUD. And just so you know, the PUD allows folks to get stuff into their bill, right? But only municipal organizations, so not nonprofit. So it requires partnership with the county to get it into the bill. And the time is pretty, the time frame to get that in is like this week or next week. So I'll let Diane talk about her work on developing that and developing something that we can use, not just for that, but also for other applications, to make sure we have a consistent experience that we can distribute as far and as wide as we can. And with that, I'll introduce Diane McDade, the president of the Jefferson Aquatic Coalition, and talk about, I guess, the survey. And I'll find that document and get it shared real quick.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you for your attention to this. As Greg mentioned, we have this survey that's been drafted. It's been looked at by a variety of individuals, including yourself. We received a lot of valuable feedback and we've edited it. And the most recent version of the edit I forwarded to you today.
Okay, great.
Just so you know, this can be, because it's all digital, we can edit the survey right up until the day that we make it live. I mean, we don't want to be doing things at the last minute, but it is editable. And as we receive any more the committee will take all feedback and try to refine it to make it as effective as possible. So input is welcome. The survey's purpose is to try to reach as many of the residents of Jefferson County as possible. And a secondary purpose with the funds that the LTAC committee has allocated to the new PFD is to look at visitors and their interest in the aquatic center. So last week, I determined with my survey group that technically we can offer a survey that would go to residents, also to visitors, off of the same QR code. And so what's kind of nice about that is the very first question would be, are you a resident of Jefferson County? And if you are, you would get the resident survey that we were going to talk about today. If you are a visitor, you would get a different set of questions, a much shorter survey. But those questions are under construction, and I expect to have a draft to you in about a week's time. And we're hoping that Greg can circulate with some of the tourist organizations and folks who really have specialty interest in that area. Because again, we can refine that tourist survey right up until February 1. We anticipate this survey would go live February 1. And we're going to try to promote it as widely as we can across the county for about 2 months, February into late March. The technology platform it's on can keep it up for as long as we wish. And in fact, for the tourist side, we may want to just keep collecting information right through the whole tourist season that we'll be entering in 25. So I think that we can keep the survey live, but we would give a report out towards the end of March after our big push, doing a lot of publicity, a lot of outreach, a lot of community meetings. We're going to put newspaper ads in. We have all kinds of organizations that are going to put it in their newsletter. And because it's accessible digitally, people can access it either through the QR code pointing their phone or their device camera at the QR code, or there's a web link that they can click on. We are debating whether or not to have on perhaps our website a PDF that people could download and print out and mail back to us. We have a post office box. That would require a tremendous amount of manual entry on our part. We're ready to see, hundreds of these. So this is something I would actually like your input on. We want to be making it as accessible as we can. The survey will also be available in Spanish. That's one of the first questions that you get as well. So you can, this will be visible for folks where English isn't their primary language. With that, I'll just quickly point you to the PFD that I'm getting these words.
No, I know.
The PDF. It's gonna be confusing. That I sent you today, which shows just a mock-up. This is not exactly to size, but it's a mock-up of the card that would appear in the 13,000 person mailing that they send out to households with the bill. And what the folks at the PUD tell me is they get a great response to surveys when it's not just a sheet of paper included in the bill, but it's a little card that people tend to hang on to more than just a, blank sheet, a sheet of paper. So they have great expertise in designing this card, and the mock-up, you can sort of see what it's going to look like with your agreement. As this becomes finalized this week, I'm working with the PUD on this. You'll get a new version of this with all the information in there, but that's generally speaking what it's going to look like. And so this would be mailed out in the month of February. They do their mailings in waves. There'd be 4 waves, and a total of 13,000 households receive it. There were questions in public comment about, well, what about if I don't get my bill in the mail? We really hope that there will be a lot of other ways that people hear about it. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to have posters out. The city has offered to put it, in their channels. They have a new digital email. They're not doing paper inserts anymore in their bills. So I think we're going to get a lot of visibility, and hopefully even, the county, if you wish, could have a link to it on your homepage. Maybe, and doing that for maybe like about a 6-week period, we hope would really generate a lot of people's awareness of it. So those are that's the overview of that process for the survey. Now, did you want to walk through it? I can kind of just quickly give you the highlights, or I don't know what.
I'd love to quickly walk through it.
Yeah, considering the comments, I think that would be great.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the first question will now be whether you're a Jefferson County resident and what language that you want to have the survey in. And then we would ask people, do you want to bring that up, Aaron? There you go. Then we'd ask people, where do they live?
This is the in Jefferson County version. We don't have.
This is the in Jefferson County version, yeah. So these are the locations they can click or put down another neighborhood that they live in. And then it would follow by age. If one does not, all the survey responses are optional. However, if they don't select age, then they won't get the question that comes up later about your swimming abilities. So then this asks you to say how many people in your household are in the different age groups that we've identified. The idea of the survey is that one adult is filling it out for the entire household. And a question that's come up is, well, can I fill it out multiple times? It will be limited by IP address, which is the equivalent to device. And so we're hoping that people will just have one survey for their household. And so then we ask them, you know what, you're not seeing it all because you're not clicking the answers. So
you want me to click the
no,
answers?
this isn't live. This is a print. So if one were to have clicked your age, then you would then come into actually you do come into this is the next question, sorry. Yeah, you're on the right thing. This just asks people if they think they'd be interested in a new public aquatic facility or not. And then the next question is, if you had clicked age, there's your swimming abilities. So in designing, one of the major reasons to do a survey like this is to really understand how many people would be using the pool for what purposes. And so knowing how many people might be interested in swimming or taking swimming lessons is really important. So we get into that, whether or not the members of your households are non-swimmers, beginner, intermediate, or advanced swimmers. Takes a while to move through that because you're seeing, this is not the actual experience. This is a, yeah. And so then we ask if anybody in your household has used an aquatic facility in the last 2 years. And then if so, where did they go in our area? So we'll get an idea of the usage of other facilities in addition to Mountain View. And then how often people have gone to an aquatic center, how often do they use it? So basically, how dedicated are they to aquatics? Followed by a list, and this is really the meat of the survey, is if the new aquatic center were to offer these various programs, how likely would you be to use them? And it starts off with youth swimming, adult swimming, moves through recreational swimming, competitive, lifeguard training, water aerobic, synchronized swimming, just things like water volleyball, water safety training for kayaking, scuba diving, water rescue, physical therapy. On that note, there turns out Greg and I have been meeting, there are a number of people interested in offering water-based physical therapy and at the pool, which would be interesting to learn. Whether you might rent the pool out to have a party for yourself or your kids. Children's and infant play, sauna, steam room, hot tub spa, or an outdoor unheated pool area. And the final question is outdoor splash pad. So it kind of covers the waterfront of all the various aquatic amenities that could be offered at the new facility. And then we asked them, if you had access to the programs that you prefer, how often would you use the facility? Again, just to see what the appetite is. And then we follow that up with a statement that while it's meant to primarily be an aquatic center, there may be potential, and of course, none of us have any idea whether there'd be adequate funding to include other sites of amenities. That's something that PFD will have to wrestle with. But based on this survey, we'd love to see if there were non-aquatic amenities co-located at the aquatic center, would people be coming and using those? There may or may not be people using the aquatic side. So we list a wide range of what many aquatic recreation centers offer, everything from childcare to preschool to play groups, yoga, Pilates, again, physical therapy based on land, dance, aerobics, meeting spaces, health and wellness classes, a community kitchen, a cafe that would have like a coffee, juice bar, gymnasium, outdoor pickleball, indoor pickleball. One that's really interesting is bouldering or indoor rock climbing. It's quite an active community here that's looking for that. There's no place nearby. Teen fitness programs or a teen activity center. So those are the things that we've heard that the community may have an interest in. We hope that that data would inform you in other policy areas, because obviously this new center isn't going to have all of that. But it would be, I think, good to just find out what people are asking for. And, you know, it's clear at the top of the survey that we're talking about a mid-county site. I skipped over that, but that's a really important thing. It's stated at the top that this site, this new facility would be sited in mid-county. So we'd find out how many people would use those kinds of programs where they offered in the mid-county. And then again, how often would they use those programs, on what kind of basis? And then finally, have you heard about the effort to construct a new aquatic center? This is maybe not the most important question, but we thought it'd just be interesting to see the level of familiarity people have. And then finally, where it will all come down to rubber meets the road, would you support an increase in the sales tax to support such a program, such a new facility? This question, to our knowledge, has never been asked in a systematic way across the county, so it will be a really interesting data point. And then finally, your additional thoughts on the project. And then there would be at the end, it's not shown on this, a link back to our website. We could link back to the county website if we wish, the Healthier Together page. But that's it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you, Diane. Anyone have any questions?
Seems like thinking through how to gather input from the visitors, right, would be a fun, fun activity, but like
these
QR
rack cars can go in hotels and
QR code on the screen on the ferries, stuff like that, but
yeah. The gentleman at the PUD who's really he's done this with a number of groups apparently, he said this rack card, he'll give us the artwork, and he said you could reproduce this, we could pay on our own time from Jack to get that out there. And because it would be useful for this, if we want to make it so it comes across the tourists would pick it up too, and visitors. So we're hoping that that's how it can work. And then that way we can if we get that out to all the folks who, who are in the world of tourism and their distribution channels and locations, I think it could really turn out to be a really great survey that's just living through the whole season, and we'll see what we get. Yeah.
To get me up to speed a little bit, I understand LTAC dollars have already been approved by LTAC, right? And that's the $1,500.
$20,000 by LTAC.
20,000.
This would market survey.
Yeah.
This is a part of that effort.
yes.
Okay, so the $1,500 comes out of that 20,000.
Yep.
And the how to use the rest of the 20,000 hasn't been decided yet.
Correct.
Correct, okay. But could be used for some of these things that you're suggesting.
Well, there was a sense
Additional
going
effort to
into
get it.
that LTAC effort that there was a need for around $100,000 for
I mean,
kind of.
there's a commerce report that another thing that I wanted to speak to a little bit is that we, one of the requirements to form a PFD is that you get an independent report with the contractor, chosen by the Department of Commerce. We did that with the initial, idea of building it in town. We want to get that look. Another thing we might want to spend some money on is getting that updated with the developments from our last year's task force. But, oh wait, I lost where I was saying, but that report, how much money you need, it remains about the same, and Diane and I are working to put together a budget for that. I got harder numbers on how much it would cost, that money included, putting something in the, getting a ballot out. And according to Quinn, if we're in the general ballots, you don't have print specific ballots, it's cost about $28,000, which is, about $20,000 less than we're going in. So our estimates are coming down a little bit from the 160 that we had anticipated.
I asked her the same question a week ago, because I have a list of revenues and expenses for the PFD.
Okay.
And she told me 60,000 for the general and 120 if we went for a special.
What?
I'll send it to you.
Well, let's, because I asked her that same question,
I'll send it to
like
you.
2 weeks ago. I'll send you mine note too, but I guess we still need to work on that. But I know that Jefferson Aquatic Coalition has been working to start raising money to come up with the staff capacity. I don't know, can you speak at all to how?
Well, I mean, we're just calling it seed money.
Yeah.
And, so it would be up to the PFD to allocate the funds. We're not gonna put conditions on it. But yeah, right now I'm at $115,000 that's been, intended donations that are intended for this purpose, and the timing of that, will simply be, when the PFD's up and running, has a bank account. But, donors are of course asking, well, what would the early money be used for? But, getting this budget, with you, Mark and Greg, would be really helpful just to give people an idea of what it is they're donating, because these donors are really special. They know that if the voters turn it down, they're not gonna see an aquatic center. So, but they also know the PFD needs to get going. And so we're trying to make this, kind of our founding donors, are people who are willing to do that, knowing it's not a sure thing at all.
And one, minor suggestion, I'm not sure if you're aware or took the Housing Solutions Network's recent survey. But if you haven't already spoken to HSN and how they got such good results, they would be good ones to check in with.
Yeah, I know, I remember taking it. I'll talk to Liz about that.
Yeah, she had some really good ideas. They did a lot of kind of boots on the ground, like they showed up at farmers markets, not just the Port Townsend Farmers Market, but the other farmers markets as well. And so that takes a lot of volunteer work to actually get out and in front of people, but I think they really credit that kind of face-to-face work with a lot of their success in getting a high return on their survey. That might just be worth asking for their ideas.
Thank you.
The other thought I'm having right now was that public comment has been productive, I think, around this idea of making sure that the questions are really vetted and that there's no concern that these questions are pushing the people who are taking the survey in one direction or another. And of course, everybody in this room, probably lots of people in the Zoom room right now have taken and probably designed many surveys, right? And so we know you can design a survey to get the answer that you desire, right? So I wonder if how many people in South and even West County you've asked to look at the questions, and if you haven't really gotten good solid feedback from people in those areas, that maybe we could run it by some people there to make sure that they feel confident that it's an unbiased survey.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're happy to expand the universe. I mean, time is a little bit tight to do that right now. We did send it to a fair number of stakeholders already.
Okay.
But we're happy to take feedback. This is I guess now public record. So if someone wanted to go through this
look at
and
it.
provide feedback. how
And
would
you
they-
said you want it to go live by February 1st, so
It has-
the comments
it
would
would
need to
really-
come in before that.
I would prefer the comments ahead of that.
Well,
So
before that, yeah.
let's just say that, you know, I'm looking at my calendar, but let's say, you know, a week ahead. I mean, really, we don't, if we're gonna make edits, we need a little bit of time to do it just to get a good survey. So
Yeah, I think that's fair, and it, you know, and it's to feel really confident that we've gotten good feedback, especially from South and even West County.
well, we have, I would say if we get feedback by the 24th, we
Okay,
could accommodate it. I will
That's
say
really
that we have
reasonable.
no
Thank you.
interest in having a biased survey because, you know, the whole idea is to elicit solid quality information. Two of the gals, on our survey group do this, as part of their living. They do public survey and public opinion research. And so it was a much more academic sounding survey at the beginning, and we tried to whittle it down a little bit to make it a little more, just sort of easy to read and get through, but they're very focused on, we're not trying to ask any leading questions. If anybody sees something like that, we definitely want to amend it.
that's fantastic, and thank you. You know, as you mentioned, we've gotten to look at it and we've all seen a lot of surveys, and I also felt that it was it was really seeking accurate, unbiased information, and if anybody out there feels like it isn't, they should provide that feedback.
Yeah.
Has North Canal Chamber, have they been reviewed it?
I couldn't.
And the North Canal Chamber of Commerce.
I-
They're
It's a
South
representative
County.
of that.
No,
I can send it out.
That would be a good group to
Okay,
review it.
okay, we can do that right away.
Thanks for being so open to that. That's
Sure.
fantastic. It's gonna make for better data.
Absolutely.
So we're past the lunch hour already, but really right now, you know, there's still work to be done on all of this, but I guess if you're ready for a motion, we just wanted to make sure that you guys were all
Will you
up to
discuss
speed.
this location,
The
the site?
Oh, that's not ready for today. That's
Okay.
just in the next week. I need to meet with the school district to see if
Okay.
that's still even a
Okay.
viable site.
And just so you know, I had earlier conversations with that school district and that person about
Okay.
this idea, and
Okay.
he was very open to it.
Yeah, he was, when we were going through it in the summer, but who knows
Yeah.
what happened. So
Okay.
I just want to refresh the information before I bring a recommendation back to
Okay,
you. So I would move that we approve the use of the $1,500 of the LTAC award to pay for this survey in collaboration with the Jefferson Aquatic Coalition.
happy to second.
All right.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
have a hand raised.
Oh, we've got a hand raised. Are we taking comment?
We weren't wanting to.
We did prevent the survey for the first time, so you might take that.
Okay, we'll bring Tom and Deborah over for comments. We might not get lunch today, guys. I have a meeting from 1 to 1:32. In the afternoon is booked, and Shelley too.
And we have a letter from Greg.
So if anyone is with us who wants to make a public comment on this conversation we're having about sending a survey regarding the Mid-County Aquatic Center location, use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or press *9 if you're on the phone, and we'll bring you over. So I see we have Deborah and Tom and Shelley so far. We'll start with Deborah, sorry.
Hi, Deborah Peterson. I live in Port Townsend. I have two concerns. One is it's not clear to me how submissions that are done on paper are going to be kept unique so that there isn't ballot stuffing by people. My other concern is that the questionnaire asks about what people might be interested in doing, how often, whether they're interested, likely or not, in various activities and features. And it really just asks people where they stand today. But I think for myself, I am not a pool user, but I would answer, yes, I think it's a very important amenity. I don't use the pool, but I don't know what my circumstances will be in the future. Something might happen to me that requires physical therapy or water aerobics. And people who don't have children. Sure. So I'm wondering if there's a way to redesign those questions for possibilities rather than how people feel about it today. Thank you.
Deborah, we lost the last part of that second question about children. After children, you faded out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody who doesn't have children now, but may soon, may want to use the pool with their children in the
future.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you. You faded out again a little bit. Okay. Let's move on to Tom Tiersch.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm struck by the very first introduction to the survey, which says that the purpose is to see, it says something about replacing Mountain View. Well, that's a little presumptuous. The city may choose to keep Mountain View and fix it. This is going to be a facility done by the county for the county, and regardless of what the city does. So I think it might be a little misleading to make that statement up front. As for the survey itself being digital versus printed, the fact that 30% of PUD customers, according to the numbers I just heard, are receiving their bills, electronically, they're not going to see this printed survey. And yes, it's going to be available all over the place in digital format, but that means that people have to know to go look for it. So that could be an issue of everybody being aware of it. Question about Port Townsend residents. Do you get a bill from PUD, or don't you get a utility bill from the city? I don't know. I was a little confused about that. Not living in the city. Pardon me?
I get both.
Yeah.
Oh, lucky you. The question about age, it flashed by the screen so quickly I didn't have a chance to notice because I was making notes. Is there a prefer not to say option? If there isn't, there needs to be on all these questions. Also, putting a flyer on the ferry, there is at least a $400 charge to put a rat card on a ferry, so should be aware of that. And let's see. Yeah, that's about it. Okay. Oh, one more thing. The word stakeholder. Every person in this county is a stakeholder because we're going to be paying for it. So when you talk about, oh, well, we need to get more stakeholders involved, or we have enough stakeholders involved, so says JAC, well, everybody in the county is a stakeholder. So, the wider the audience and the wider the number of participants in designing and preparing this thing, the better, the more equitable. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And then we have Shelley Yarnell, and we can respond to all of these comments after we get these pieces of input. Shelley, yeah.
Shelley Yarnell Brennan. On the survey, it's a lot of questions, and then you get down to the meat, how we're going to pay for it. So I think the how are we going to pay for it needs to be moved to the top so that you get that information right off the bat. I think that you need to have an idea of what you expect people are going to pay for this climbing wall, birthday room, yoga track, whatever you're putting in this huge big complex that's being promoted as a tourist pool. So I think that there's lots to change here. And I think it definitely is slanted to, oh, wouldn't it be great to have this wonderful tourist attraction? That's not what we're looking at. And I think it needs to be brought back down a couple of steps. The survey is a great idea. It's only one idea. And I hope that there are indeed many, many more because that has not been what's happened in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley.
We have a new hand raised.
Okay, bring Jean over. Jean? It's your turn, Jean.
Thank you, ma'am. A tremendous amount of effort needs to be expended to do some outreach to the districts that are not District 1. It's easy to reach people in densely populated areas, but to reach people in the rural areas who are less connected to these various efforts to outreach, you know, whatever, the paper or the farmers markets or a PUD mailer or something like that. I think that we're asking for a certain group of people to respond and a certain group of people to not respond, and that gives me great concern. Yes, the chamber would welcome an opportunity to review this. Thank you very much. We have a meeting on the 20th, and we would be happy to take a look at this survey. I think it was stated that there would be a mailer sent to 13,000 residents. Was that correct? And if so, that's just a little more than a third of the population of the county. And as we know, the entire county will be expected to pay for this. The West End, there's going to need to be a little bit of effort put into reaching out to people on the West End. It's not just, you know, South County that is going to be difficult to reach. The West End is going to have to pay for this also. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
Mason County, our spreading residents.
Okay, there are no more hands up. Does,
Yeah, a little bit of a response real quick, and then I guess Diane has one too. Let's see, Mr. Oh wait, I'll let Diane go first because I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's comments, first of all. On the question about the Mountain View pool that was raised, the city of Port Townsend, had a unanimous vote to support the findings of the task force that came out this summer with the recommendation that there only be one public pool that operates in the county. It's not really feasible economically for taxpayers to support two public pools. Pools in general, you know, are propositions where you need as much usage as possible, and dividing it up into two locations is not advisable. So the from a financial viewpoint, the city is on board with the idea that Mountain View would be kept alive as long as it can be while a new facility is built, but they would not move, they would then move to shut down Mountain View. And so that's the answer to that question. In terms of our questions required, there's no requirement to answer any of the questions. You can answer some of them, but not all of them. So if you don't answer the age question, then you simply wouldn't get the swimming lesson question, but you could answer the rest of the survey. Paper surveys, to answer Deborah's remarks, we haven't decided on this yet. There is a huge problem for us to manually enter all this data, were we to have an option that people print it out. The idea is that it's accessed digitally through a web link that you get in an email. Or you access it through a QR code. And so the idea of the paper survey is still something we're not really certain that it's a great idea to do it. In talking with various folks who have done surveys in the county, and the PUD has some experience with it, they said they get a very, very, very small number back.
and I go hang out with my constituents who want that option and fill the survey out for them and bring it back and enter it in. So I have 3 constituents who are.
So I mean, we're happy to do it. I don't know how to answer Deborah about the ballot stuffing thing. I don't know how we would determine that. Maybe it's not a large concern. But if we need to, we're happy to put it on our website as a P. Yeah. And then, you know, we'll find the volunteers to enter the data. We're happy to send it over to the chamber. Those are my responses.
I'll say outreach has already started to some of the far-flung areas, you know, I mean, of course, there's a question about where people live. That's an important data point for sure. And we want to make sure that we get representation. I mean, we talked about the Housing Solutions Network's fantastic response on their survey, and that was 1,800, right? We've also talked to South Whidbey Island that got 20%, 30% of their service area responding. We want to get this out to everyone, of course, and we're already reaching out, like the Village Council wants to do a town hall about this. A lot of people in Port Ludlow, though they have 3 pools, are really interested about what does a pool do for everyone. And so Diane's joining me at Port Ludlow. We'll be going to Quilcene and Brennan, the other areas. The West End's always a conundrum for sure. It's going to have to be, but that's a digital survey, of course, is the most accessible of surveys. If it was printed out, it would be less accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll point out that if they're mailing out 13,000 paper bills, what's the average occupancy per household?
Right. Yeah,
So
at least 2.
2.5. So That's covering 27,000 of our residents.
Yeah, nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
And the survey response percentages, I mean, I think it's important, anybody who hasn't kind of administered a survey before to realize that the actual return of a good return on
It's
a,
like 5%.
yeah, is like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
And if you're getting any beyond that, you've made some extraordinary efforts. And I am in no way saying that we shouldn't make extraordinary efforts. I think what I've heard is that this PUD mailing is just one of the things.
It
you're
is,
gonna try
it's
to
one
get it out.
of
Yeah.
many, many things, and to answer Jean's comments, we plan, we have volunteers, we're meeting this week, we'd like to do community meetings in Brennan and Colson. We're gonna be calling people who run the community centers and asking if we can do a meeting in the month of February or March, so we're poised to begin doing as much community outreach as we can, as we have volunteers who are able to go and do it, so. I'm really looking forward. I think that it will start a dialogue and, it will be a healthy one. That's what I believe.
That's great. Yeah, we can, sounds like the 20th, the meeting down there is feasible to get that to them so they could review it and give that good feedback.
I can send more stuff.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for being here.
Have not voted yet.
There's a first and a second on the motion. All those in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you for all the work, Diane. I know it's taken many people.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are done with our morning agenda items, but there were a couple there. We want to do consent. And there
We
were.
can do it this afternoon, right? There's no time critical thing.
There's
We have an
Yeah, but-
executive session for an hour.
1:30 and then we have
We're
to
adding
adjourn
a
by
topic to it.
2:30.
Oh, okay.
We're only gonna have. We're not gonna have any time. We're gonna have half an hour.
Right.
Or
So
less than.
Let's just get
Okay.
through this. So did anyone? Other than you have questions on consent? I had a couple.
I do too.
Okay. You go first.
Okay, there were, I think this is probably okay, I just need to confirm, there were 5 of these items, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8, where Commissioner Dean's name is still there and the place where I should be signing. Can I just toss
Yeah,
her name out?
we were gonna white it out, but
Okay.
those are contracts that have already went through contract review before
Okay,
the beginning of the year.
Great.
So they had a casing.
awesome, just wanted to make sure that was a procedural thing we were allowed to do. On the, this number 2, the substance use disorder evaluation services for incarcerated individuals. This, description here on the agenda and the memo that goes with it are swapped. They show 33,450, 455 in 2025 and 30,198, 28 and 26, and it's actually the other way around. The contract is correct. Is that, can we
That's
just
good.
sign the contract and even though the agenda is?
Yeah, so what you're approving is the items in the consent, but you can call it out and my minutes will reflect the correct.
Oh, great.
So I'll swap out the 30,000 with 33.
Yep, it's, yeah, and like I said, the contract the only reason I knew it was that the contract shows it, and then the appendix actually shows the real dollars, so that works.
Yeah, the contract is the one with this.
Cool. On the fire community assistance, number 4, there are no budget details on the Exhibit B. It references Exhibit B, but they're blank documents.
I'll pull it up and look at the original and see if it was a scanning issue.
Okay. And I mean, I think the totals are there, but we don't get to see how the dollars are proposed to be used. So, just a
I'm
question.
sorry, do you know what page that might be on?
It's, well, it's Exhibit B. I'll pull it up. So it's toward the very end of the contract. Let's see if I can pull it quickly. It is the fire community assistance, the CARES.
So Exhibit B, it came out blank? I have it hard copy.
Okay, yeah, on the item that's attached here. There is nothing on them.
Yeah, see, there's no dollars.
Yeah, it was blank in here. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. I thought you said the page was blank, so.
No, yeah, the table is there, but there's no dollars that say how the money's gonna be spent. And we're supposed to be approving how the dollars are gonna be spent. So I'm assuming this, I know this came through Behavioral Health Advisory Committee, right?
I'm gonna look.
So hopefully you guys got a
Yeah.
presentation
Yeah,
on
no,
how
we
the
did,
dollars
we
are gonna be
did.
spent, and, you know, it's recommended by the BHAC,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
I just didn't get to see that, so I don't really know how the dollars are being proposed.
no, they come and they make presentations to the BHAC, so
Fiscal impact per candidate, so, actually, maybe I need to look at my notes here, if anybody has other questions while I gather my next question.
I had a question on item number 1, the flag policy. There's no allowance for us to lower the flag if there's a local. Early in my tenure, I requested that the flag be lowered when Richard Voigt, a former county commissioner, passed away, and we did that. We were told we had the authority to do that. But in this policy, there's no provision for any kind of local lowering of the flag other than state and federal elected officials. And I could see that coming up again in the future. It says that the county has the authority, but then it goes through all the specific authorities we have, and there's nothing mentioned about.
Good point.
And would you like to pull that?
Yeah, I think so.
Bring it back?
And could we consider Mr. Tiersch's comment about just adding the detail of that
Flying
they
at
need flying at all county
No,
facilities?
that's not a requirement, and that would be a burden on staff.
Would it? Okay.
Yeah, the US code says near or on the grounds of the main administrative building of. local
And that's
government.
it. That's what what we're currently doing
Well,
now.
that's what the federal code says to do.
That's fair.
And now we do have other flags, out at the sheriff's office, but I wouldn't want to. Flag of Castle Hill, for example.
Okay, yeah, that seems reasonable. Thank you for asking the question.
Maybe Sean wants to respond to that, since he just walked in the room.
About your question.
The question about the ability to lower the flag if there's a local, someone who's deceased, like a local former elected official or
Yes,
a state representative, for example.
that is not called out in the policy because it's specifically a provision of the US code. And in the policy, we state that we always go back to the code. So I didn't put in specific language for that point because there really isn't an opportunity to change that. Some of the other examples were really put there just to add some clarity, some context around flag issues. When those flags, give some examples of when flags may or may not be lowered.
So do we have the ability then?
Absolutely.
As county, a county.
For the
commissioner?
US.
Yes, per the US code, you absolutely have the authority to make individual
Okay.
decisions on lowering the flags.
Okay,
for
that's great.
individuals.
That's just what I wanted to make sure we still have. Not that I want anyone to pass away or,
There you go.
but, okay, thank you, Sean.
Absolutely.
My last question was on the approval of three-way professional services agreement by the Clallam Economic Development Council and Jefferson County, the NOLA. It's one. It says, I think it's really clear in the fiscal impact says that we're taking on 1/3 of the $41,060. That's $13,687 being paid by Jefferson County, right? And then it says that also in the contract review form, it says that our expenditure is $13,687. But in the contract, it says on number 4 payment, the consultant should be paid by the Clallam County Economic Development Council half and Jefferson County half. Shouldn't that be 2/3, 1/3?
It used to be half. I think the new contract is.
Right, I think it used to be half.
Okay, but when we'd be signing a contract that obligates us to pay half, not a third.
Yeah.
Well, you can approve it subject to that change.
Okay.
Catch.
Okay, let's see, is that all on? I have one more item to pull off.
Go for it.
Okay, so we resolved number one and we're fine with it, so we don't need to pull that off.
Yeah.
And then the Honeywell contract. Okay, based on the change. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to bring to our attention was number 12. The county legislative agenda. We have a couple of our budgetary items in our agenda, like the aquatic center design cost, 250,000. The Mill Road environmental review and right-of-way acquisition, which we have at 1.29, but we'll finalize that in our conversation with the city tomorrow. We're having a meeting with the city to talk about this item. So that number may change on the legislative agenda. Currently, the city is requesting $500,000 for design costs. And we have said we will request the additional 1.29 for environmental review and right-of-way acquisition. That's our current thought on what we're gonna do going forward, but we need to confirm this with the city tomorrow. In addition to those two that are already listed in our legislative agenda, Sam Harper at Public Works is filling out a community request form for an additional $2 to $2.5 million for completion of the phase 1 Hadlock wastewater system, because it's come to their attention or the concern that they might not be able to actually complete the installation with the funding we already have on hand.
Wow.
And so I said, well, let's just get this in front of Derringer so he knows that there may be a need for additional funds. And I met with her on this 2 weeks ago, so it's pretty current information, and she's filling out that form for that one. And then there's, I don't know if we need to fill out a form for this one, but I just am going to fill out a form and share it with Derringer. As part of the state's capital budget trust line transfer program, which is something I've been working on for years now. We have 4 projects that are on that list. Jefferson County does. They were all below the initial appropriation level. But some of the projects that were on that list up higher than our projects have been funded in other ways. And now they may be able to reach our first project on the list in this capital budget round, which is the Cape George, the 492 acres at Cape George, including the Lost Wilderness, which sits right across the street from your parents' house.
Yes.
And the part that's north of Cape George Road, where DNR has some timber harvest plan, but the community, Cape George community, is really taken on use of those trails and has come to rely and love those trails. And so we're trying to keep those in passive recreation, and Mallory started to think about doing some forest health thinnings in there instead of having a haircut in the next couple of years. So that's the reason behind Cape George. And so I am going to submit a form, or at least a request to Steve, asking for that project to be considered when they get to the trust line transfer program in the capital budget. That won't compete with any of our other projects because trust line transfer is a program in the budget.
It has its own funding.
The other thing that I talked with Eric Kuzma about late last week was the idea of adding an additional $500,000 for access preservation on Upper Hoe Road, just in case we need state DOT to step in with any kind of support for road repairs out there. Kind of as a backstop placeholder kind of situation. We're hoping it can come from the federal highway emergency funds, but just a little bit of concern about the state not knowing that we need this funding. So those 3 additional items.
Are you going to?
They aren't on the.
They aren't on there, that's why I'm bringing it up, because they came up
Well,
after
the
this.
trust line transfer one is,
There's a mention of trust land
yeah,
transfer.
we added it at the bottom. And so thank you for reviewing that, because that was my question. I hadn't seen those before when we discussed it before. So my only other question about the trust land transfer item is that it says it's Anderson Lake.
and or Cape George. It's
Like Cape George is higher on the list.
and Cape George is higher on the list, so.
Yeah.
Which maybe want to reflect.
Yeah.
That.
Cape George, yeah. So is there any concern of adding the additional costs for the Haddock sewer? Or state DOT funds for Upper Hill Road to our legislative agenda?
Instead of
Not instead of,
being, though we also support, but actually putting them up above with a.
well, I was thinking of just putting them in the list below.
That we also support list.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Sure.
'cause the capital budget, trust land transfer one is already there, looks like.
Yeah, we just got a number for that.
Okay, I don't have any issue.
Are you waiting to confirm numbers from the city of Port Townsend for this one?
Yeah, so we're gonna pull it for now and I'll bring it back next week.
Okay, yeah. because we're gonna pull it
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay.
Does that give us a chance to maybe run these other additional items by Stephanie and make sure she knows, or have you already?
I already have.
You already did that. Okay, great.
Okay, so I'm happy to,
If the only question on the memo is the dollar amount for Mill Road, could we approve it subject to knowing that number rather than having?
no, because there's the other three.
That
Oh,
have
do
to be added.
Do you want to bring it back?
I want to
Review
bring
the
it back.
language?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think that that's a timing issue. We're not gonna be in Olympia before next Monday. I'll be there on Thursday that week.
Plenty of time.
So following item, so I moved to approve the consent agenda. I was looking for that. NOLA amount.
Number 6.
13,000, for the page, 687.
Well, the amount on the agenda was wrong, but the amount in the contract was right.
Yeah,
The
we just changed the payment paragraph to 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, the payment
So
paragraph.
you can approve
exactly.
it subject to
Okay,
that.
okay. And then I'm also looking at the fire cares, because it has all of their activities here, so I don't. This is the amount that the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee approved to give them for each year.
Yep, I'm comfortable knowing that the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee got a full presentation from the CARES program.
Yeah.
I'm also comfortable because I know what the impact of that program, I know what they do and it's amazing work. I would just say,
I'm trying to look, but what page was the miss that you highlighted?
on the
Yeah.
CARES contract,
Yeah.
it's again, at the very end, exhibit B, I don't have that, so you're probably gonna get there faster than I will. Toward the end, you'll see exhibit B has the tables, but they're empty, there's no dollars. Whereas on the other ones, it shows how they're using all of the dollars. In this case, we had 19,
Okay, I was looking for the page.
yeah, so it's page, what is that, 19?
19,
Okay.
so not to exceed.
Mhm. And might be one other page too, is that go on to a second blank table, yeah, so it's 19 and 20. That have the tables, but there's no information in them.
Okay, I have to think they were there when they submitted these, because we wouldn't have. But. The not to exceed total is there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
is it reasonable to think that we could get those?
Yeah.
Filled out?
Okay,
Just for accountability down the line.
but do we need to pull out from the agenda?
If we want, we can't just put those numbers in. If we want that number populated, we should probably wait a week and get it.
Does it hold them up in any way? They're not gonna get their funding for a week later and so.
So
I'm not intending
reimbursed
to-
as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's reimbursement, it's fine. Okay, so we're gonna pull number 4 and
Sorry,
number
Karen.
12.
We do
I'm
care.
a stickler for detail.
And I'll follow up with East Jefferson about, or Gabby about the tables, and then we'll complete the additional items for the legislative agenda. And then we are fine with item 6 based on the change, so I'm happy to move that we approve the consent agenda minus 4 and 12 with the change to number 6.
Okay. I'll second.
You'll second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'm sorry, 1 second.
I Heather.
And then, was there anything else before we take a break?
Greg had a letter.
Oh, no, let's bring it back, or if we can't get it on, I'll just sign it myself. It's the letter of support for an RSU grant from Olympic National Forest. That I forgot to bring it forward, so it's on me, but
Is it time sensitive?
I was time sensitive to my life.
Okay. Have your lunch date.
Yeah, do it.
Have your lunch date, Commissioner.
All right.
We are recessed until,
You don't want to do calendar coordination.
we're gonna recess until 1:30. Okay, are we transiting now? Yeah. Okay, I'm calling us back into order for afternoon session. Here at 1:33, and we are immediately gonna go into an executive session. With our county administrator, chief civil deputy prosecuting attorney, chief. Our civil deputy prosecuting attorney, our public works director, and our assistant public works director. We're gonna go in at 1:33 and come out at 2:03. We are going into executive session. To discuss with legal counsel potential litigation. Exemptions as outlined in the Open Public Meetings Act, RCW 42.30.110 parentheses 1 parentheses I. And I will go in now and we'll come back out. at 2:03.
Okay, it says this meeting's being transcribed.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Heidi, you can come do the announcement here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, we had technical difficulties. We came out of executive session and we're going back into executive session with our county administrator, chief civil deputy prosecuting attorney, civil deputy prosecuting attorney, public works director, assistant public works director, and lead planner. We are discussing with our legal counsel potential litigation. This is an exemption as outlined in the Open Public Meetings Act, RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I. We are going into the executive session at 2:10 and we'll come out at 2:30.
And mute that.
More time. Sorry, I thought I did. I recorded, but maybe one more time, Heidi. Okay, sorry. One more time.
We are adjourning this meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners.
We're coming out of executive. Sorry, we have to do the whole thing one more time, sorry.
Okay, we are coming out of executive session. Sorry, we did this already and I guess volume wasn't on. Coming out of executive session, no action was taken and we're adjourning this meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners and going into a transportation benefit district meeting at another location. See you there.